Chapter 4054. Hee, no matter if this golden core is a dragon core or an ancient golden core, being able to let Xiaohua comprehend is better than anything else. Jade Archive Xiaohua did not dare to disturb Xiaohua's comprehension. He faintly smiled and was about to leave. GG. A few thunderous low humming sounds came from the immortal execution stage. A black shadow streaked across the sky and landed in front of Jade Archive Xiaohua. Wasn't that the already awakened little Lei? Lightning flashed around little Lei's body as its two fleshy wings faintly flapped. Hundreds of tiny lightning bolts flickered in its pitch-black eyes. When the lightning disappeared, a look of closeness and longing appeared in its eyes. Jade Archive Xiaohua stretched out his hand and gently rubbed little Lei's head. He smiled and said, "You're awake?" GG. Little Lei's eyes were filled with joy. He chirped and raised his wings with joy. Traces of lightning appeared on the edges of his wings. "It's good that you're awake," Jade Archive Xiaohua said again. "This old man has a cultivation method for lightning beasts. Are you willing to cultivate it?" GG. Lightning Beast jumped up. His wings were tightly wrapped around his back. His small body was slightly bowed, showing respect and caution. Jade Archive Xiaohua slightly smiled. He stretched out his finger and pointed at little Lei's forehead. Rumble. Thunderous sounds came from Xiao Lei's body. Lightning also burst out from his body. Jade Archive Xiaohua raised his hand to stop the lightning from expanding. Then he carefully looked at Xiao Lei. Xiaohua saw that Little Thunder's eyes were tightly closed, and the lightning flashed along with Little Thunder's eyebrows. Xiaohua knew that Little Thunder was memorizing and comprehending the inheritance of the Thunder Beast, so he was relieved. He sent Little Thunder into the thunder water below the immortal executioner stage, and then his figure flashed and landed on the Ice Worm King's egg, Water Pattern Butterfly, and Dream Mirage Butterfly's egg. Although these insect eggs had not hatched yet, Xiaohua had already sensed a strong vitality within them. He believed that it would not be long before these little things were born. Xiaohua was really looking forward to seeing what was special about these insect eggs that had been separated by yin and yang. Woo! A black light flashed. The Divine Power Centipede also flew over and swam around Jade Archive Xiaohua. You're also not willing to be left out? As Jade Archive Xiaohua spoke, he raised his hand and tapped the back of the Divine Power Centipede. Although the Divine Power Centipede was powerful, it was too low level. Jade Archive Xiaohua knew that there was no inheritance of the Divine Power Centipede in the Fey race. Woo-woo! The Herculean centipede seemed to be very happy. The antennae in front of its head waved rapidly. Jade Archive Xiaohua's heart moved. He smiled and said, "Your primordial spirit is relatively weak. Even if you split it into yin and yang, I'm afraid you can't compare to other demonic beasts. How about this? Since the Dragon Hall's Grand Elder can use the Dragon Cleansing Liquid to repair his primordial spirit, I'll give you some Dragon Cleansing Liquid as well. Let's see if you can have some good fortune." As he spoke, Jade Archive Xiaohua raised his hand and grabbed. Several drops of Dragon Cleansing Liquid fell on the Divine Power Centipede's body. Zzz. With a burst of crackling sounds, the Dragon Cleansing Liquid entered the Divine Power Centipede's carapace. Strands of dragon patterns faintly appeared. The Divine Power Centipede let out a low roar and its carapace quickly curled up. A wave of dragon chi enveloped the Divine Power Centipede. "Oh right, there's still dragon worship and the strange insect." Seeing the changes in the Divine Power Centipede, Xiaohua's heart moved. He sent the Divine Power Centipede near dragon worship and the strange insect's carapace. After the Divine Power Centipede evolved, it would be able to use it. Since everyone has their own fortune, this old man will also have to work hard. Jade Archive Xiaohua looked around the space. At this time, the space was already 3 million li wide. It was even bigger than when it was in the blood pool of gods and devils. Jade Archive Xiaohua's slightly proud voice sounded like thunder in the entire space. His figure gradually disappeared. Xiaohua's mind left the space. He didn't dare to rest and immediately closed his eyes to meditate. After an unknown amount of time, the sky gradually darkened. The sky was filled with dense red clouds. In the dark night sky, the Pegasus flying chariot's pure white brilliance became even more dazzling. It was like a meteor streaking across the sky. Suddenly, Xiao Hua, who was meditating with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. His divine sense swept forward like a hurricane. Kacha! High up in the sky, a bolt of lightning flashed, illuminating the space within a radius of dozens of miles. What appeared along with the lightning was a continuous stretch of black clouds. These black clouds were connected to one another, like a mountain range, and like the waves of the sea. Woo! A gale suddenly rose, covering the sky as it rolled towards the earth. However, before this lightning and hurricane could fully display their might, a muffled sound was heard. It was like someone yawned in the air. The space within a few hundred li stopped moving forward. Then, within 1,000 li, countless light shadows fell, penetrating the heaven and earth. In this light shadow, the space was distorted. Fragrant flowers floated out from the void. Layers of noble qi condensed into pearls, sprinkling light and darkness over 1,000 li. Fujiwen was a little late to react. Seeing all kinds of strange phenomena, he hurriedly stood up from the flying chariot. The dots of runes gushed out from his body and turned into armor. Immortal Palace's inspector? Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes. His divine sense swept out like lightning. However, after crossing 1,000 li, it was blocked by the light shadow. Inside the light shadow, the law chains swam more arrogantly than pythons and dragons. How could Xiao Hua not know that this was the Immortal Palace's inspector? However, when a crisp sound rang out, Xiao Hua knew that he was wrong. Because in the flying flowers, a small winding path appeared. A female official dressed in palace attire gracefully walked over. The female official's voice rang out, "Husband Fu, are you all right? Isn't this the female official and who returned to the Immortal Palace?" Wife. Fujiwen was dumbstruck. He really didn't expect that the one who appeared in such a big battle array between heaven and earth was actually his wife. This concubine and greets Taoist Master Xiao. And only said one sentence to Fujiwen before turning her head. She stood in the air and respectfully saluted. Then she said to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua stepped out of the flying chariot. He narrowed his eyes and looked behind In the light shadow, a flower-covered huating appeared. This huating was so abrupt. However, in the sea of flowers that stretched for several hundred li, it was so elegant. A small path leading to a secluded place appeared in the middle of the flowers. Flowers fell on the small path, like broken glass. The petals withered, giving birth to an indescribable melancholy for no reason. No need for formalities. Xiao Hua's gaze couldn't penetrate the sea of flowers. He simply retracted his gaze and looked at and thoughtfully. My master is waiting inside huating. Spiritual Master Xiao, please. And didn't say any more nonsense. She stepped aside and said with a smile. Xiao Hua was somewhat enlightened. He looked at Fujiwen on the flying chariot and said with a smile, "Could it be that you're here to propose marriage? Your master is really a wonderful person." He, spiritual master will naturally know when you go. Then blushed and replied with a smile. All right. Xiao Hua landed on the small path with large strides and said, I just returned from Dragon Island. It just so happens that I have some treasures. If it's used as a betrothal gift, it'll be worth it. However, Xiaohua walked a few steps and didn't see and following him. He turned his head and said somewhat strangely, then you're not coming? And slightly tilted her head and replied, this concubine is shy. Spiritual master, please go. Xiaohua laughed and stepped into the flower path. The flowers on the left side were like thousands of swaying hearts, waiting for the right person to pick them. Xiaohua walked through the flower path and arrived in front of Huting. He saw the moonlight and candlelight flickering in Huting but didn't see anyone. He didn't find it strange and stepped into Huting. Huting was still the same Huting and the red candles were still the same red candles. However, another person stood up from the jade chair behind the stone table. Xian? Xiaohua was dumbstruck. He looked at the picturesque, beautiful woman in palace attire in disbelief and cried out in surprise. How come it's you? How come it's not me? XNXIN's eyes flashed with craftiness. She asked back, could it be that there's only the little monk Tipu and not Princess XNXN? Xiao Hua looked at this little girl who had never expressed her feelings but had already been engraved in his heart. From time to time, she would smile beautifully in his mind. He replied with a bitter smile, my imagination is really limited. I really didn't expect, you're actually the one by, and talked about, and some princess. I didn't expect it either. XNXN smiled more brilliantly than the hundreds of flowers outside Huading. The little monk Tipu is Xiao Hua. I also didn't expect Xiao Hua to be the famous Jinren Xiao of the hidden immortal continent. I didn't intend to lie to you. Xiao Hua's explanation was a little weak. I was just afraid of bringing you trouble. I'm not afraid of trouble. XNXN said, you're the one who's afraid of trouble? Okay. Xiao Hua was helpless. He raised his finger and pointed at his heart, saying, I've already apologized countless times in my heart. Unfortunately, you can't hear it. Loquacious. XNXN curled her lips slightly and said disdainfully, you're a little monk with a glib tongue. I won't believe you. Then you should practice the mind connection of the Buddhism sect. Xiao Hua laughed. With your identity, Mahavairakana will definitely teach you personally. Tisk. XNXN sneered. Men don't say what they think. Even if I'm proficient in the mind connection, I'm afraid I can't hear what you think. Xiao Hua blinked his eyes and scratched his head with his hand, as if he was thinking hard. After a moment, he asked curiously, I don't seem to have been to Cha New country? Good thing you didn't go. XNXN snorted. If you had gone, I wouldn't have come. Hee hee. Xiao Hua smiled. What are you laughing at? Where's Li Jing? Seeing Xiao Hua's evil smile, XNXN stamped her feet and asked. The smile on Xiao Hua's face disappeared. She looked straight into XNXIN's eyes and said word by word, on Cast Love Mountain, one's heart is broken. This? XNXIN was a little surprised. She sucked in a breath of cold air and unconsciously shook her head. Fairy Jing is indeed a decisive person. Admirable, admirable. You came just to tell me this? Xiao Hua rubbed his nose and asked with a bitter smile. Of course not. XNXIN's gaze was gentle. She pointed at the jade chair beside the stone table and said, take a seat first. After Xiao Hua sat down, XNXN waved her sleeve and a few plates appeared beside the red candles on the stone table. There were peaches of immortality, mutant fruits, a jade pot, and 2 wine cups. Chapter 4055. This is the famous peaches of immortality of the Immortal Palace. You can try it. XNXN sat down, picked up the jade pot, and slowly poured out 2 cups of clear wine. He said warmly, Empress Immortal Elixir was made from these peaches of immortality. But Xiao Huan naturally didn't care about immortal elixirs. However, seeing how attentive XNXN was, he still took one and took a bite. When the peach melted into spiritual liquid and entered his stomach, Xiao Hua praised, it is indeed the legendary peaches of immortality. It lives up to its name. If you like it, you can eat it all. XNXN was delighted and pushed the jade plate to Xiao Hua. That won't do. I still want to try the imperial wine of the Immortal Palace. Xiao Hua smiled and reached for the wine cup. Unexpectedly, XNXN hurriedly blocked him and said unnaturally, don't be in such a hurry. Tell me what you've been doing all this time. Damn. Xiao Hua held his forehead and said, you even know about Fairy Jing. What else do you not know? I know. I want to hear you tell me in detail. XNXIN said coquettishly. But Xiao Hua looked around and said in a low voice, if we talk, can others hear us? Don't worry. XNXN said with a smile, even the immortal emperor can't hear us. How is that possible? Xiao Hua didn't believe it. If you can find me so easily, how can the immortal emperor not know? Don't forget what we got in the Xianshui Palace. XNXIN reminded him softly. Oh, not bad. Xiaohua understood and gave him a thumbs up. You're really something. You took that thing and eloped to the lower realm, bah? Xen spat. What do you mean eloped? Tell me. Xiaohua knew that Xen only wanted to listen to him speak, so there was no need to pay too much attention to the specific details. Thus, he roughly explained what happened after they parted. Xen held his cheeks and looked at Xiaohua for a long time. It was unknown whether he was listening, watching. Under the red candles on the left and right, Xen's beautiful face became even more focused, causing Xiaohua's heart to be intoxicated. Xiaohua. After Xiaohua finished, Xen came back to his senses. There was some panic in his eyes. He raised his wine cup and said, "It's been hard on you. Come, let me toast you." Alright. Xiaohua raised his wine cup and lightly clinked it with Xen's wine cup before placing it on his lips. The slightly viscous wine gave off a mellow fragrance that made one feel as if they were floating when smelling it. Xiaohua slightly raised his head and poured the imperial wine into his stomach. A faint floral fragrance emerged from his mouth and tongue. I brewed this wine myself. It's not some imperial wine. It doesn't have a name, and it doesn't have any special effects. Xen put down the wine cup, looked at Xiaohua, and said in a low voice, "Are you disappointed?" Xiaohua replied with certainty, "Even if it's clear water, to be able to watch you drink it, it's the world's #1 spiritual wine." Xiaohua. Xen bit his lips. His face was red as he stared straight into Xiaohua's eyes. Xen. Xiaohua also looked at Xen. His gaze was like a clear spring, flowing into each other's hearts. At this time, silence spoke louder than words. For a full meal's time, neither of them opened their mouths, nor did they move their fingers. In the end, Xen raised his left hand from the stone table and raised it in the air. At the same time, Xiaohua, who had a tacit understanding, also raised his right hand. The two people's hands slowly touched each other. A cold and delicate fragrance came from Xen's hand. The two people looked at each other and their palms touched each other. Suddenly, the red candle seemed to be blown by the wind and jumped slightly. Between the light and the darkness in Huading, Xen and Xiaohua opened their hands almost at the same time, and their 5 fingers clasped together tacitly. Xiaohua. Xen's voice was close to a moan, low and trembling. I was worried that your strength would increase too fast and attract the attention of the immortal emperor. But now you're the dragon master of the dragon tribe. I'm afraid that my immortal palace won't dare to touch you at will, so I'm relieved. But I'll toast you again. Good. Seeing that Xen was reluctant to let go of his left hand and only used his right hand to fill 2 cups of wine, Xiaohua's heart melted. He raised his cup and said, "This toast is for you. Tell me about your life." But Xen calmly finished drinking and put down the wine cup. He clasped Xiaohua's 10 fingers with one hand and propped his cheek with the other. He looked at Xiaohua with somewhat blurred eyes and told him about his life. Xen's experience was naturally not as rich as Xiaohua's, but those palace fights also made Xiaohua's hair stand on end. In the end, Xen said, "Also, after my immortal palace's Heaven's Choice Assembly, the immortal emperor and Mahavairakana have reached a tacit understanding. The so-called war between immortals and Buddhas has been eliminated. You're now the dragon master, but don't be in the limelight too much. Beware of being noticed by the immortal palace again." Ah! Xiaohua was shocked. How is that possible? The war between immortals and Buddhas is imminent. Not to mention the Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent sharpening their swords, even the Buddhist sect of the Elysium world is rubbing their fists. How can they stop fighting just like that? You men only know how to fight and kill. Xen's fingers moved slightly and fiercely grabbed Xiaohua. He rebuked, "Once the war between immortals and Buddhas starts, who knows how many cultivators will die? Grand Mist Ancestor is adding fuel to the fire from behind, wanting to gain some benefits for the Dao sect. Could it be that you also have the same idea? I'm wrongly accused." Sophistry is like sweet talk. Xiaohua has never lacked it. He opened his mouth and said, "I just feel that things happened too suddenly. Previously in the God-Devil blood pool, the Buddhist sect and the Confucian cultivator clan fought fiercely. How can the immortal emperor and Mahavarakana ignore the feelings of the two clans and compromise like this? I also don't know the specific reason, Xian said with a smile, but the so-called compromise is nothing more than the satisfaction of common interests or a common threat that forced the two sides to join hands. And the result of this compromise is that the Buddhist sect can preach in my hidden immortal continent and my Confucian cultivators can also clear up doubts in the Elysium world. In this way, both sides' interests can be satisfied, so why not? The problem is... Xiaohua frowned. The Buddhist sect in Yu Province's Longevity Town had great results. They took the initiative, so why did they suddenly stop? Instead, they let the Confucian cultivators enter the Elysium world? Mahavarakana wouldn't be so easy to talk to, right? Of course it's not that simple. Xian explained. This compromise has a process, it needs a test. Oh? Test? Tell me in detail. Xiaohua was surprised, but then he said with a smile, of course, if it involves the secret of the immortal palace, then there's no need to say. Xian's left thumb stuck up. Xiaohua's right thumb also stuck up. The two of them seemed to be playing. Their thumbs stuck together and turned slightly. Xian's gaze became gentle again as he said with a smile, before the Heaven's Choice Assembly, of course it's a secret. But now, the Elysium scripture seeking plan has already begun, so it's not a secret anymore. Elysium scripture seeking plan? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. What does that mean? Is it going to the Elysium world to ask for Buddhist scriptures? Mahavarakana had just comprehended the Tripitaka Mahayana Buddhist scriptures. It seems like ordinary monks can also condense relics. His request is that if we want to stop the war, we must allow him to explain the Mahayana Buddhist scriptures in the hidden immortal continent. Xian replied, but our immortal palace naturally can't agree so easily. Our request is that there must be a bodhisattva who can go to the great lightning tune temple to bring the scriptures to the hidden immortal continent. That's why it's called Elysium Scripture Seeking Plan. Isn't that simple? Xiaohua said with a smile. Just find a bodhisattva to go to the great lightning tune temple and bring the scriptures over. Hehe, do you think everyone else is more stupid than you? Xian pursed his lips and said with a smile. The moment Mahavarakana's suggestion came out, the Immortal Palace went into an uproar. All the Immortal Palace officials opposed it. However, the Immortal Emperor's decree had already been decided, so they racked their brains to increase the difficulty of finding this bodhisattva. In the end, they finally came up with a method that was almost impossible. Let's hear it. Xiaohua was surprised. What kind of impossible method is it? First of all, this bodhisattva must be recorded in the Elysium world. Xian seemed to take out something she liked to share with her beloved. Her beautiful face smiled until her dimples appeared. Secondly, this bodhisattva must depart from the immortal town in the Yu province of the hidden immortal continent. First, he must go to the great lightning tune temple in the Elysium world and then return to the immortal town. Thirdly, this bodhisattva must preach the Confucian scriptures in the Elysium world. When he comes back from the Elysium world, he must preach the Mahayana Buddhist scriptures in the hidden immortal continent. This doesn't seem to be difficult. I can do it. Xiaohua asked in confusion. How is this impossible? Don't be anxious. Xian rebuked. The most important thing is that this bodhisattva cannot have any Buddhist or Confucian cultivation. Or it could be said that he cannot have any cultivation. Moreover, not only can this bodhisattva not borrow any magic power in the process of preaching the scriptures in the Elysium world, he also cannot borrow any magic power in the process of going from the Elysium world to the hidden immortal continent. How is this possible? Xiaohua was flabbergasted. How can a bodhisattva who only chants scriptures and recites Buddhist scriptures without any magic power come to the immortal town? And even if he came to the immortal town, how can he smoothly return to the great lightning tune temple in the current situation? Difficult. In the process of preaching the scriptures in the Elysium world, whether it is the immortal emperor, the Mahavarakana world revered, or the great saint of the demon clan, none of them can directly make a move. Otherwise, the Elysium world revered will be considered a failure. But why is there a great saint of the demon clan? Xiaohua was a little puzzled. Xian ignored Xiaohua's question and said, if there is really a great difficulty, there seems to be some flexibility, but I am not too sure about the specific boundaries. I am curious. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This war is disadvantageous to the Immortal Palace. The Mahavarakana world revered finally compromised. Why is the Immortal Palace still making so many difficult problems? Isn't this driving them away? Chapter 4056. Even the Immortal Emperor has his difficulties. Xen says faintly, don't tell me what you did in the God-fiend blood pool and a dragon island wasn't for this. Then what about Vairocana Buddha? Why would he agree? Xiaohua asks with a smile. Xen also frowns. Yeah, when I heard about this, I was also worried for the Immortal Emperor. I thought that Vairocana Buddha would not agree no matter what, or even lower the conditions. Who knew that Vairocana Buddha did not refute at all and immediately agreed. This made all the officials in the Immortal Palace dumbfounded, feeling that they had fallen into Vairocana Buddha's scheme and smashed their own feet with a rock. Could it be that Vairocana Buddha had already planned this? Don't forget, Vairocana Buddha is. At this point, Xiaohua laughs himself. Vairocana Buddha has the art of karma. How could the Immortal Emperor not know how to predict the future? Xen nods. Sutra seeking in extreme bliss was naturally proposed by Vairocana Buddha. If he had plans, that would be normal. But the problem is, how can there be such a bodhisattva? Even if there is such a bodhisattva, the entire sutra seeking in extreme bliss is definitely not just seeking sutras. Xiaohua can naturally see the strangeness in it. Xian's thumb is still twirling with Xiaohua as it replies, of course. Sutra seeking in extreme bliss is just a gimmick. There will definitely be many difficulties along the way. Not only will my 100 Family Association obstruct it and prevent it from being completed normally, even some heavenly king protectors of the Buddhist sect will think of ways to cause trouble. There are also 1,000 demons, sacred realm demons. Xiaohua reminds, those great sages will probably not watch from the side and will not allow the Immortal Emperor and Vairocana Buddha's plan to be completed. Not just them. Xen says with a smile, Yudao sect cultivators will definitely not let this bodhisattva safely walk to the great lightning tune temple in extreme bliss, right? It has nothing to do with me. I will immediately go into seclusion when I return. I will not care about anything. Xiaohua raises his left hand and replies solemnly. It's best that you don't get involved. Xian replied. The sutra seeking in nirvana is also a process of elimination. Many forces will show up. The Heavenly Palace and the Big Lain Temple will do their best to protect this bodhisattva. But if anyone shows up, they will definitely strike with lightning. Who knows, maybe the Grand Mist Ancestor will suffer a great loss this time. If that's the case. Xiaohua looked at Xen with a smile and said with a double meaning, do I have a great chance? Xen naturally understood the meaning behind Xiaohua's words. He unconsciously blushed and said in a low voice, this? I don't know. Seeing Xin so shy, where was the arrogance of a princess of the Immortal Palace? Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't been close to a woman for several hundred years, so his mental fortitude was inevitably weakened. However, when he felt Xiaohua's palm burning hot, Xen immediately jumped in fright. He used his left hand to pinch Xiaohua's right hand, wanting to pull his hand out. How could Xiaohua let her have her way? He hurriedly tightened his grip. Xen whipped a few times but didn't have any effect. He glared at Xiaohua and hurriedly changed the topic. However, Xiaohua, don't underestimate Mahavairocana's methods. Do you still remember the little monk Ci Hui? Of course. Xiaohua nodded. Is he already Manjushri Bodhisattva? Yes, he's now in Yu Province's Longevity Town. He received Mahavairocana's Buddhist edict to find a sutra seeker in Yu Province. Xiaohua was even more baffled. Why didn't Manjushri Bodhisattva go to Western paradise to find a Buddhist disciple? Isn't this giving up what's near at hand to seek what's far away? XNXN rolled her eyes at Xiao Hua and said, "You're stupid. Longevity Town is the starting point of Western Paradise's Sutra Seeker. Moreover, Mahavarakana has already issued a Buddhist edict several decades ago. Every temple in Western Paradise must send a disciple to Longevity Town to worship Buddha. If a suitable disciple can be found, then wouldn't Western Paradise's Buddhist disciple need to travel thousands of miles to hidden immortal mainland? Why do I feel that there's something fishy about this?" Xiao Hua said thought-provoking. "Mahavarakana must have done something. I haven't found out what he did yet," XNXIN said with a smile. "However, there seems to be some clues about the Sutra Seeker in Western Paradise." Ah! Xiao Hua was speechless. "This person must have been arranged by Mahavarakana." "You're wrong," XNXIN said with a smile. "Mahavarakana doesn't know about this. It was discovered by Immortal Emperor when he used the clear sky mirror to search hidden immortal mainland. However, since Immortal Emperor knows, then Mahavarakana also knows. Who's this monk? How can he be so powerful? Even I want to go and take a look." Xiao Hua didn't care about it in his heart. He just followed XNXIN's words and asked casually. "This monk came from Western Paradise's Golden Mountain Temple. His Buddhist name seems to be Chuanzang." Boom! XNXIN's words hit Xiao Hua like a thunderbolt. Xiao Hua's expression became sluggish. His thumb that was moving along with XNXIN's thumb also became empty. XNXIN immediately felt that something was wrong. She stopped and asked curiously, "What's wrong? You know this monk?" Xiao Hua looked at XNXIN's pure face and said with a bitter smile, "Don't forget, I've been to Western Paradise. I've really been to Golden Mountain Temple. However, I didn't say that there was a monk called Chuanzang in Golden Mountain Temple. He's called Chuanzang. This monk is the disciple of Great Master Nirvana." XNXN suddenly realized and said with a smile, "He seems to be a disciple of Golden Mountain Temple after you and I left Western Paradise. How could you have seen him that day?" Xiao Hua was somewhat absent-minded. He was almost certain that this Chuanzang was Jiang Luer. After all, although Jiang Luer had been in meditation for hundreds of years, he didn't have any psychokinesis. However, he still had some doubts. If Chuanzang was Jiang Luer, why didn't he cultivate Buddhism? An ordinary Buddhist trekked from Western Paradise to hidden immortal mainland. That kind of difficulty and danger was definitely not something that ordinary people could imagine. How could XNXN not see Xiao Hua's absent-mindedness? She asked tentatively, "Could it be you have some karma with this little monk?" Xiao Hua collected his thoughts and shook his head. "I still don't know who this monk is. There's no need to talk about karma now. However, if there is some karma, this matter, be careful," XNXIN said with concern. "Anyone can seek benefits in the sutra seeking extreme bliss. Only Taoist cultivators can't." "I know," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "I'm also a Tipu. You're so cunning," XIN rebuked. Xiao Hua looked at the empty wine cups on the stone table and said with a smile, "How can 2 cups of newly brewed wine be enough?" With that, Xiao Hua raised the pot with his left hand and poured the clear wine into the 2 empty wine cups. XNXIN's eyes showed a slight pain, showing her helplessness. She pulled her left hand out of Xiao Hua's hand. Xiao Hua naturally didn't loosen his grip, but XNXN shook her head slightly and tightened her grip. Xiao Hua didn't dare to stay any longer and loosened his grip. XNXIN's left hand took out a jade eye from her bosom and said with a forced smile, "Xiao Hua, I know you are looking for the real refining method of the wishful rod. This is the refining method I asked for from the master of Jade Pure Palace. It also records the location of some magnetism in hidden immortal mainland. I hope it will be useful to you." "Oh, thank you very much." Xiao Hua beamed with joy. He took the jade eye and was about to look at it. XNXN stopped him and said, "You and I don't need to thank each other. You can take it and look at it later." But Xiao Hua took back the jade eye and seemed to have thought of something. He asked softly, "I still have a question about the 5 cheese unifications, Xian's eyebrows slightly moved. She lowered her head and didn't look at Xiaohua. She said, "Presumably, you have already met the great scholar of true Confucianism in the God-Devil Blood Pool and obtained a certificate of true Confucianism. This true Confucianism is an organization whose purpose is to find the real cultivation purpose of Confucianism. Because today's Confucianism is no longer the Confucianism of the past, the path of cultivation seems to have some deviations. Many ambitious people in the Immortal Palace and the 100 schools of Confucianism have already seen the hidden dangers, so they formed such an organization. Although the true Confucian hasn't found the true purpose of Confucian cultivation, we've already discovered that the true cultivation techniques of Confucian cultivation are recorded in the 5 heavenly tomes. These 5 heavenly tomes aren't complete heavenly tomes. One of them is half a heavenly tomes. Of course, even the 4.5 heavenly tomes are nowhere to be found. No one knows where these heavenly tomes are scattered in the hidden immortal continent, the pure land of ultimate bliss, or the 1,000 demons' sacred realm. Perhaps it is the will of heaven, or perhaps it is man-made. The true meaning of Confucianism has already been hidden in the dust of time. Oh, right, that certificate is not only a certificate, it is also a life-saving amulet. If you encounter a great danger, you can use your true qi to crush it. It will give you an unexpected surprise. While speaking, Xian's eyes unexpectedly have some clear tears. She raised her wine cup and said, "Darling Xiao, come, for your future, let this concubine toast you." But although Xiaohua felt that Xian's mood was somewhat fluctuating, and he felt that it was inappropriate, he had plenty of time to talk to Xian, so he did not mind. He raised his cup, clinked it, and said with a smile, "My future is also your path." Just as Xiaohua was about to finish the cup in one gulp, Xian suddenly stopped. She raised her hand and extended it to Xiaohua's cheek. She lightly touched Xiaohua's skin and said in a low voice, "Xiaohua, do you think this concubine is too casual? You and I have only met once. Even though we have experienced life and death in the mysterious water palace, but, of course, Xiaohua was also very surprised. After all, women were not like men, especially women of Confucianism. Which one of them did not emphasize the 3 obedience and 4 virtues and not look at indecent things? As a princess of the Immortal Palace, Xian could not indulge her feelings even more. Xian's private meeting with him in the lower realm was indeed a great taboo in the Immortal Palace. "I think you must have your own reasons," Xiaohua replied after some consideration. "Moreover, if you don't say it, how can I know your heart? This is an opportunity given to us by the heavens." Phew! Xian seemed to let out a long breath, as if she had put down a heavy burden. A charming smile appeared on her face, and she raised her wine cup and drank it up. Kacha! As Xian's wine cup was emptied, the entire night sky was instantly filled with thunderbolts. It was as if heavy rain was pouring down, and all the tranquility and beauty were completely shattered. Looking at the left side of the huading, the brilliant sea of flowers now seemed to be ravaged by thousands of hands, and the petals fell miserably into the flower path. What's going on? Xiaohua was stunned and looked at Xian with some confusion. Xian forced a smile on her face and said, "Darling Xiao, after today's parting, I don't know when we will meet again. You have to cultivate diligently." Kacha! Another thunderbolt struck huading. The whole huading shook, and the wine pot on the stone table was knocked over. However, the wine pot was already empty, and not a single drop of wine flowed out. Hiss! Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air, and finally understood why Xian took so long to fill the 3rd cup of wine. Alas! Xiaohua sighed and looked at Xian. "Why didn't you say so earlier? Sooner or later, we will have to part in the end." Xian raised her eyebrows and looked at the large watery clouds in the night sky. There was some bright brilliance at the edge of the watery clouds, as if the light of dawn was about to come. Just like the sky, dawn will come eventually. Xian. Looking at Xian's eyebrows and the swaying light in the night sky, Xiaohua understood that he couldn't say anything more at this time. He gently held Xian's waist, and Xian struggled with all her might. However, seeing Xiaohua's lips on her forehead, Xian closed her eyes in both pain and happiness. Her hands nervously grasped each other and trembled slightly. However, this trembling suddenly stopped, just like Xian's body, which suddenly stiffened. Her tightly closed eyes in Xiaohua's arms suddenly opened, and her eyes were filled with disbelief and surprise. Chapter 4057. After a while, Xiaohua's lips left Xian's forehead. The faint green light had already disappeared. Xiaohua looked at Xian and said in a low voice, "Go back. One day, I will go to the immortal palace to find you." Xian's eyes rekindled with hope. "I know you will. Xiaohua's name will definitely resound throughout the 3 continents." Kacha. 9 bolts of lightning struck down simultaneously, shattering Huading, the sea of flowers, and everything else. A chair on the back of a colorful phoenix appeared out of thin air. Xian reluctantly landed on the chair, and he saw tens of thousands of colorful clouds shooting up into the sky. Pillars of noble qi propelled the colorful phoenix up into the sky slowly. "Xiaohua!" A sweet smile appeared on Xian's face. She said, "Seeing you today, this life is enough. If fate wills it, we will meet again." Xiaohua slightly raised his hand and said with a smile, "There is no need for fate. We will meet again soon." Xian, you have to believe me." "But I believe you." Xian smiled. The entire night sky was lit up, and the rainy night shone brightly. Not far away, Tao Wu's figure also turned into a stream of light and shot into the sky. Along with the colorful phoenix, it disappeared into the void. "Damn it, this is a little strange." Seeing all the strange phenomena disappear, Xiaohua carefully thought about it and felt a little apprehensive. Xian came out for no reason and left for no reason. Her strange emotions were really strange. "Disciple." Xiaohua raised his hand and said, "Have you had enough?" Fu Jiwen obviously knew what Xiaohua was teasing him about. He said honestly, "There are immortal palaces inspectors nearby. How would I dare to be rash?" "What did Tao Wu say?" Xiaohua asked in a low voice. "I feel that there is something strange about it." Indeed. Tao Wu's words were also strange. Fu Jiwen agreed. However, no matter how much I tried to get her to say, she didn't say anything. In the end, when thunder fell from the sky, she sighed and said, "Thunder rises, rain falls, flowers wither, 3 cups of fate end, from now on we are strangers." "Tisk." Xiaohua smiled coldly. He looked at the dark sky and said, "What nonsense end of fate. Xian treated me like this. How can I let her down?" "However, master, this matter is rather difficult." Fu Jiwen whispered, "Jiang Hong bears the burden of the Grotto Heaven River. If Lu Yi wants to form a relationship with Jiang Hong, he has to bear the burden of the Grotto Heaven River. Moreover, Princess Xinxin is the princess of the Immortal Palace. Master, your task is very important. Of course, for the sake of my own happiness and yours, I have no choice but to cultivate properly." Xiaohua nodded and said, "Let's go, let's hurry back to the soaring Dragon Mountain range. Master will inform you that we still have to make a trip to the Longevity Town." "Master, why are you going to Longevity Town?" Fu Jiwen was puzzled. "Aren't you rushing back to the soaring Dragon Mountain range to enter seclusion? Plans cannot keep up with changes." Xiaohua said helplessly, "I have no choice but to go to Longevity Town. A very important relative of mine is there." "Master still has relatives." Fu Jiwen was extremely shocked. That might not be the case. Xiaohua's heart was somewhat irritated for no reason. He waved his hand and said, "We can only go and take a look to know." "Master?" Fu Jiwen asked in a low voice. "From here to the soaring Dragon Mountain range, we just happened to pass by Ping Shan country. What do you think?" Xiaohua nodded. "No problem. Since I have already promised you, I will definitely do it. This Kunlun immortal realm is extremely spacious. Moreover, the heaven and earth origin qi is increasingly abundant. Not to mention your Fu family, even if you Zhongquan and Chang Yuan two families come here, it won't be a problem. Thank you, Master. Fu Jiwen was extremely happy. Disciple has already told them. However, junior brother Yu and junior sister Chang's relationship with their families is not good. Therefore, they do not plan to go back and invite their families to stay in Kunlun Immortal Realm. Although junior brother Wang Bianfei did not say anything, it seems that he also misses his mother. Alas, the ancients have a saying that when one's parents are present, one should not travel far. It really makes sense. Xiaohua sighed and said, blood ties cannot be cut off no matter what. Master originally wanted to go to Longevity Town first and then return to the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range. It seems that I should return to the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range first. Thinking about Wang Bianfei's mother missing her son in the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range every day, Master feels very uncomfortable in his heart. Yes. Fu Jiwen's expression was somewhat gloomy. Disciple's parents are already old. If Disciple does not return, I'm afraid that I will not be able to see them anymore. Let's go, Xiaohua said with a smile. Then what are you hesitating for? Of course, your parents chasing you out of the sect is also for your own good. But then again, even if they did something wrong, think about how they raised you. You should be filial to them every day. Fu Jiwen previously had a gap with his parents because of Tao Wu's background. Now that Tao Wu was a female official of the Immortal Palace, wouldn't she be 100 times more noble than an ordinary woman in the world? Therefore, the grudge in Fu Jiwen's heart disappeared, and he was eager to return home. Several months later, in the mountain range on the west side of Pingshan country, Xiaohua stood on the flying carriage with a smile. Seeing Fu Jiwen fly back dejectedly, he said with a smile, "What? Your parents did not come out with you?" My parents did not believe that Tao Wu was a female official of the Immortal Palace. Fu Jiwen said with a bitter smile. No matter what Disciple said, they always said that Disciple lied to them. It seems like they saw through your previous plan in an instant. Xiaohua said with a smile. Master did not agree that day. You used the Immortal Palace as a cover, but did not have the Immortal Palace's token. How could you persuade them to go to the Immortal Palace? Besides, without the proper ceremony, it would not be legitimate. Why would they go to the Immortal Palace with you? Actually, the most important thing is that mother's health is not good, and father is not willing to leave Pingshan country. As the saying goes, it is difficult to leave one's homeland. Fu Jiwen said with melancholy. But the more it is like this, the more Disciple is worried. Master understands. Xiaohua nodded. Lightning flashed around his body as he said, Look at Master's methods. Master, you can't really. Fu Jiwen suddenly remembered what Xiaohua had said to him earlier. Without waiting for Fu Jiwen to finish, Xiaohua's figure disappeared. All right. Fu Jiwen sat on the flying carriage and quietly looked in the direction of Pingshan country. He said helplessly, Looks like I can only use force. In less than half a cup of tea's time, lightning flashed near the flying carriage and Xiaohua's figure appeared. He said with a smile, Let's go, Disciple. It's done. Thank you for your trouble, Master. Fu Jiwen smiled and urged the flying carriage to fly towards the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range. At this time, Yu Province was not as calm as Xian had said. The Buddhist sect and Confucian cultivators were still fighting openly and covertly. Chaotic Buddhist senses and eye-clearing techniques appeared in the air from time to time. Fu Jiwen had only been flying for a few days, but there were already several groups of Confucian cultivators blocking his path. In the end, Xiaohua put away the flying carriage and had Fu Jiwen accompany his parents in the space, while he flew towards the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range. Xiaohua returned to the Fortune Gate not just a day later. Xiong Yi and the other disciples did not expect him to return so soon. They were ecstatic to welcome him. Xiaohua's actions in the Fiend God blood pool had spread throughout the hidden immortal continent. Naturally, the disciples of the Fortune Gate had also heard of it. The scheming disciples like Xiong Yi had long seen the hope of Xiaohua's rise. They also saw the Fortune Gate's reputation shaking the hidden immortal continent in the future. They were full of confidence in their own futures. Xiao Hua sat on the Fortune Dao Palace's throne. He did not ask about the Fortune Gate's development during this period. Instead, he explained his cooperation with the Flowing Merchant Union in detail. He also ordered Xiong Yi, Lan Ji, and Li Xiang to bring out some spiritual herbs, medicinal pills, and things from the Forbidden Spring Sea. He then released Wang Baifei and asked him to invite his mother. When Xiong Yi and the others saw that Xiao Hua did not ask about the Fortune Gate's affairs, they knew that he trusted them. However, they still mentioned some important matters. When Xiao Hua heard that due to the recent war and famine on the hidden immortal continent, a large number of refugees had appeared, and that the Fortune Gate had accepted tens of thousands of children as disciples in order to expand their forces, he frowned. He pondered for a moment, and his consciousness entered the space to discuss with the green-robed Xiao Hua. He then ordered Li Xiang to divide the disciples and gather them in one place. When Xiongyi heard this, he immediately thought of the tens of thousands of disciples that Xiao Hua had accepted in the Jiang country's capital. He hurriedly advised, "Master, you still have to cultivate. With so many low-level disciples, it's better to let the disciples teach them." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "My Fortune Gate has just been established, and its foundation is not stable. We should recruit more disciples. But if we recruit so many disciples at once, the low-level disciples won't be able to teach them. After all, they also have to cultivate." Yes, disciple did not consider it properly. Xiong Yi's face was burning. Disciple only feels that they are pitiful, Xiong. Xiao Hua shook his head and said, "You did the right thing. Master is not blaming you for this. If you did not accept them, they would have starved to death the next day in the wilderness. Even if my Fortune Gate does not develop, we must do these good deeds. Master means, there is no need to say more now. In short, leave the disciples that you can teach, and Master will take the rest." "All right." Seeing Xiao Hua's determination, Xiong Yi did not refute. Li Xiang frowned again. "Master, didn't you just come back? Why do you still want to go out?" "It can't be considered going out." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "I heard that the Longevity Town is going to put on a good show of seeking scriptures in paradise. Master wants to go and take a look." So that's how it is." Prince Lan smiled and said, "Disciple has long heard that the Buddhist sect has pasted a Buddhist list in the Longevity Town, waiting for a suitable arhat to reveal the list. It has already been half a year, right? No suitable arhat has appeared. I'm afraid this matter will be ruined. The show that Master wants to see won't happen." "Absolutely not." Xiao Hua smiled. But just as he said this, Xiao Hua's heart suddenly moved and he stood up from the jade chair. Excitement appeared on his face as he exclaimed, "That's right, although there are not many arhats who can go to paradise to seek scriptures, there is definitely more than one. Why must Jiang Luer send himself to death?" Chapter 4058. Master. Xiong Yi and the others looked at each other, not knowing what Xiao Hua was talking about. "Master." At this time, Wang Yifei brought his mother to the main hall and was about to greet Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua flew in the air, waving the Kunlun mirror in his hand. A beam of light covered the two of them as he said, "Go to the Kunlun paradise first, we'll talk later." He then turned to Xiong Yi and asked, "Are those disciples ready?" "Of course." Xiong Yi hurriedly stood up and answered, "Those who can be taught and those who can't be taught are separated. There is no need for special preparation." "Good." Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "Bring Master there." Master suddenly thought of something and needs to do it immediately. Actually, if Master has something to do, there is no harm in doing it first. We'll talk about it after you're done. Xiong Yi answered with a smile as he led the way. Xiao Hua shook his head with a wry smile. Master thought that matter was already confirmed, but I didn't expect. Master received the news too early, the real thing hasn't happened yet. Therefore, Master is a little flustered. Xiao Hua followed Xiong Yi to the back of the mountain and looked at the neat rows of huts. They were very similar to the huts he saw in the Imperial Thunder sect. He nodded with satisfaction and then took out the Kunlun mirror. He released his consciousness and took the hut and the boy inside into the space. Then, without daring to delay, Xiao Hua nodded to Xiong Yi and the others and flew out of the soaring Dragon Mountain range. Looking at Xiao Hua's back as he flew away in a hurry, Xiong Yi was a little confused. He pondered inwardly, Master has already accepted more than 10,000 disciples, and now he has taken in another 20,000 children. In total, he has 30,000 disciples, which is more than the soaring Dragon Mountain range's Fortune Gate's disciples. Could it be that Master has other plans? Xiao Hua didn't know what Xiong Yi was thinking. He had already activated his flying technique and rushed towards the Longevity Town, wanting to stop monk Chunzong before he took down the Buddha list. Of course, the premise was that Chunzong was Jianglu. Looking at the familiar scenery below him, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be too arrogant. He lowered his body slightly and used the appearance-changing technique, turning into a small nose and small eyes Zhang Xiaohua. Then, he took out his Confucian robe, held the feather fan in his hand, and used his flying technique to rush to the Longevity Town. Very quickly, the path that Xiao Hua, Yuan Ye, Lu Yi, and Xiao Jian had taken to leave Longevity Town appeared beneath him. The scenery was still the same, but the people on the road were no longer the same people from back then. See. Xiao Hua flew for a while and saw the Buddha in the air and the believers on the ground. He released a bit of his telekinesis, but it wasn't tight. Xiao Hua gasped in surprise and exclaimed, "Why is there so much power of faith here? Could it be that the power of faith belongs to Si Hang?" As he spoke, Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at the 99-meter-tall Guanyin Bodhisattva standing in midair in the distance. Needless to say, the true body of the Guanyin Bodhisattva was the real Si Hang. But the real Si Hang had already passed away, and only the fake Si Hang existed in this world. No wonder Mahavajrana, revered Buddha, had the idea of seeking scriptures in nirvana. This Longevity Town is just a town, and a Nanwo Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body already has so much power of faith. If the entire hidden immortal continent was filled with temples and Bodhisattva's golden body, how much power of faith would that be? Xiao Hua greedily inhaled. He knew that if he released the Bodhi Sarira now, perhaps Bodhi would immediately attain enlightenment. Unfortunately, in this Longevity Town, even if the Buddha Sarira wasn't in seclusion, Xiao Hua would definitely not dare to release it. Thanks to the innate divine restriction in my Naiwan palace. Xiao Hua rejoiced as he flew. If it wasn't for these innate divine restriction concealing the Buddhist aura, even if the Buddha Sarira didn't want to come out, this rich power of faith would have fallen into my Naiwan palace. At that time, it would be impossible to conceal it. Jiangchao Temple? When Xiao Hua flew closer, he used the clear eyes technique to look. He had already noticed the changes in Jiangchao Ridge, and unconsciously became a bit dazed. After a moment, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Damn it, Jiangchao Temple is obviously my Dao sect's Taoist temple. How did it become a Buddhist temple now? Only, where is that so-called Buddhist list? Xiao Hua looked at the left side of Jiangchao Ridge, but didn't see any trace of the Buddhist list. Then he looked at Jiangchao Temple again. At this time, Jiangchao Temple was flourishing with incense. Rays of Buddhist light lingered above the temple. Within the Buddhist light, one after another, Buddha statues faintly appeared. Along with the sound of wooden fish inside the temple, the Buddhist light rushed out. This was precisely the imposing manner of a Buddhist bodhisattva overseeing the temple. At the same time, rays of tranquil Buddhist awareness slowly swept across the surroundings of Jiangchao Temple. With one look, one could tell that it was the inspection of the Buddhist sect's guardian heavenly king. Xiao Hua pressed down on the cloud and saluted a Confucian cultivator who was slowly flying by. "Greetings, fellow immortal. I have something to ask. Fellow immortal, there's no need to be so polite. Is there anything I can help you with?" That Confucian cultivator was also very polite. "I heard that there is a Buddhist list of Mahavajrana in Longevity Town. It's to find people who are seeking sutras in nirvana. May I know where this Buddhist list is?" Since it's a Buddhist list, it's naturally inside the temple. The Confucian cultivator smiled and said, "Fellow immortal, it's difficult for you to see it. That Jiangchao Temple only allows Buddhist disciples to enter. We Confucian cultivators are not even allowed to come within 10 feet of it. The Buddhist sect is actually still so arrogant? Xiaohua asked in a low voice. I heard that on that day, wasn't there a Dongfang family disciple who attacked the Buddhist sect's Manjushri Bodhisattva with a sword and extinguished their arrogance? Alas, that was then and this is now. The Confucian cultivator sighed. Now, the Immortal Palace is colluding with the Great Thunderclap Temple. They don't care about the fate of the 100 schools of Confucian cultivators, and actually do something evil like seeking sutras in nirvana. Even if we 100 schools of Confucian cultivators extinguish the arrogance of the Buddhist sect, what can we do? It's sad that they don't rise, angry that they don't fight. Alas, the pitiful immortal emperor. Xiaohua observed a moment of silence for the immortal emperor in his heart. He waved his hand and bid farewell to the Confucian cultivator. Although the Confucian cultivator's words were somewhat extreme, they clearly represented the thoughts of the majority of Confucian cultivators who didn't know the truth of the matter. Under the influence of the Confucian aristocratic families, these misunderstandings had increasingly deviated from the truth and were increasingly disadvantageous to the Immortal Palace. Seeing that the clear eyes technique couldn't penetrate the Jiangqiao Temple, Xiaohua didn't dare to use the transfiguration technique near the Jiangqiao Temple again. He hurriedly flew out of the longevity town, found a secluded cave, and quietly transformed into the appearance of a young Buddhist monk, and once again rushed to the Jiangqiao Temple. At the same time that Xiaohua entered the cave, a bamboo raft floated along the Liao River. The bamboo raft was very simple and even somewhat damaged. Behind the bamboo raft stood an old fisherman holding a long bamboo pole. In front of the bamboo raft was a young monk wearing a clean monk's robe. His hands were clasped together, and he was piously looking at the Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body covered by silk on the riverside. He was chanting, Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva? Wasn't this monk Jiang Lua, whose Buddhist name was Chuanzang? As the bamboo raft approached the Jiangqiao Ridge, several Buddhist senses had already swept over it. There were also several clear eyes techniques. It seemed that they had already anticipated Chuanzang's arrival. However, Chuanzang was unaware of all this. Looking at the shore that was getting closer and closer, he turned his head and said very kindly, "Boatman, please stop here. I'll have to trouble you along the way. Little monk, have a safe journey." The old fisherman stood up shakily, raised his hand full of cracks, and waved benevolently as a form of farewell. Then he propped the bamboo pole in his hand against the blue stone on the shore. The bamboo raft left the shore and slowly moved downstream. The bamboo raft drifted straight for several miles. The fisherman who had been standing steadily at the end of the bamboo raft suddenly trembled. His straw raincoat slowly disappeared, and the fisherman straightened up. Small heavenly flowers appeared in the void near him. The fisherman's wrinkled face also changed, revealing a solemn appearance. However, this Buddha's face was deathly pale, and even the muscles on his face were somewhat twisted. It was obvious that he was in extreme pain. Namo Amitabha. The Buddha chanted the name of Buddha, raised his foot, and stepped into the void and disappeared, leaving only the real bamboo raft drifting further and further away in the Liao River. More than 10 miles away, a patch of blood was sprinkled on the protruding rocks above the river. It was very dazzling under the noon sun. The ignorant Chuanzang, who had always been fearless, stood below the Jiangqiao Ridge. He respectfully put his palms together and looked at the golden body of Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva on the Jiangqiao Temple. He then tidied up his monk robe and chanted, Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. After walking the deep Prajna Paramitha for a long time, he saw that the 5 skandhas were all emptiness, transcending all suffering. Saraira, form is not different from emptiness, emptiness is not different from form is emptiness is form. As Chuanzang chanted the sutra, he kowtowed with each step and walked up the Jiangqiao Ridge with great sincerity. This was a path of pilgrimage and also a path of spiritual sublimation. Chuanzang enjoyed walking on it very much. Every kowtow made his body feel relaxed and made him feel that he was one step closer to his ideal and pursuit. Chuanzang, who was immersed in his own world, did not notice that the mountain path, which was originally filled with people, had gradually become less and less crowded. The equally devout believers began to disappear. On the contrary, the sound of the wooden fish, the chanting of sutras, and the chanting of the Buddhas became louder and louder in his ears. Not only did the Jiangqiao Ridge have a strange phenomenon, but the entire Longevity Town also suddenly became quiet. The noise disappeared, and the complete hostility turned into peace. Rays of Buddha light inexplicably gushed out. Perhaps there were people walking on the streets, or perhaps there were people buying and selling in the shops, but all these became the background. All the eyes, the focus of the entire hidden immortal continent and the nirvana world, now fell on the Jiangqiao Ridge and on the body of Xuanzang, who was kowtowing step by step. Tens of thousands of people were admiring, tens of thousands of immortals were holding their breaths, and tens of thousands of Buddhas were watching. Everyone was quietly waiting for the beginning of a new era, waiting for the beginning of a miracle, waiting for a good show to start. Chapter 4059. At this place, the dangers that Xuanzang experienced before would no longer exist. No one dared to face the wrath of the Immortal Palace and the Great Leiyin Temple in public. No one wanted to disturb this ordinary monk's devout worship of Buddha. Although Xuanzang was already bearing the burden of the war between immortals and Buddhas, his meticulous movements showed the demeanor of a bodhisattva. Finally, a loud chime came from the Jiangqiao Temple. Xuanzang stepped onto the Jiangqiao Ridge and arrived before the golden body of Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva. When he got up again, he looked at the golden body of Guanyin Bodhisattva that was tightly covered by silk. An indescribable melancholy arose in his heart. He said softly, "Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva, disciple is Xuanzang of the Jinshan Temple. I came here to worship Buddha under the order of my Buddha. I didn't come to the hidden immortal continent. I didn't know that the Buddha's light here can't shine. At the same time, I also know the Buddha Lord's intention. I hereby make a great vow that if the golden body of Bodhisattva is not revealed in the hidden immortal continent, if the Bodhisattva's Taoist field is not revealed in the town of longevity, I will not attain the Buddha fruit in this life." Dong. Another bell rang as thousands of Buddhas chanted, Amitabha, Amitabha. Along with the chanting, a young novice monk came out from the side of the lotus seat of the Guanyin Bodhisattva. He put his palms together and said, Amitabha. Disciple Chongping greets Uncle Master. Amitabha, martial nephew, is too courteous. Xuanzang hurriedly returned the greeting. He looked left and right and said with a smile, I came from the Golden Mountain Temple in the Elysium. Along the way, I heard that there are many believers in the Jiangqiao Ridge of the town of longevity. I wonder what happened today? All right, Uncle Master understands. Chongping replied, My Buddha has issued a Buddhist decree, and the senior brothers and senior uncles of the Pure Land of Ultimate Bliss have all come to support my river and tide temple. However, my Buddha is merciful and does not wish to incur the hatred of the Confucian cultivators. Hence, after paying respects to Buddha, they all turn back. However, the Confucian cultivators have been oppressing our Buddhist sect, so our Buddha's light can only shine in the longevity town. Sigh, what a tragedy! Xuanzang sighed. Buddha delivers all living beings from torment and enlightens the myriad of worlds. This is the most important thing in the world. Why can't it be tolerated in the hidden immortal continent? Buddhism is vast and will not help those who are not fated. Chongping smiled and raised his hand. Martial uncle, you've come from afar to the longevity town. Please follow me to the temple for tea. Many thanks, martial nephew. Xuanzang nodded and followed Chongping down another mountain path. Chongping, who was in front of him, had no cultivation at all. At this moment, Xiaohua, who had just arrived at the longevity town, suddenly felt a rarely seen aura suddenly descend from the sky, enveloping the entire longevity town. At the same time, from another direction, an extremely dignified aura also appeared, surrounding the longevity town. Everything in front of him suddenly became somewhat unreal, as if he, the mountain, and the people on the road had all turned into shadows. Not good. Who is here? Xiaohua was startled. Sweat dripped down from his forehead. He complained about his carelessness in his heart. Almost without thinking, he released his spiritual force. Unfortunately, his divine sense was like nothingness. No matter how hard he tried, his divine sense could not leave his body. Moreover, his figure began to drift in the air. No matter how hard he tried to circulate his true essence, he was unable to take even half a step forward. Damn it! How could Xiao Huan not know that the experts of the Buddhist sect and the Immortal Palace had already sealed off the entire Longevity Town, eliminating any factors that would disturb Jiang Luer's announcement? Xiao Hua's mind raced. He had brought Jiang Luer from the Xiaoyu continent to the Western Paradise. Now that he could wake up from his meditation, Xiao Hua was very happy. If it was under normal circumstances, Xiao Hua would definitely not stop Jiang Luer from doing anything for the Buddhist sect. However, it was unusual now. Jiang Luer had no strength to truss up a chicken. In front of the many forces of the hidden immortal continent, the Western Paradise, and the Thousand Demons' sacred realm, any cultivator from these forces could easily kill Jiang Luer. Although the Immortal Palace and the Leiyin Temple were protecting Jiang Luer with all their strength, after the two forces came, countless methods would fall on Jiang Luer like a storm. If the two forces were to slack off, Jiang Luer would die. Moreover, the two forces might protect Jiang Luer now, but who knew what would happen in the future? What would happen in the future? Would they still care about Jiang Luer's life and death? Xiao Hua could not take this risk. He could not let Jiang Luer, his only relative in the three continents, fall into such a dangerous situation. Xiao Hua clenched his teeth and landed on the ground. He retracted his aura like an ordinary person and walked towards the Jiangchao Temple. Amit Ba. Chuanzong stepped into the Jiangchao Temple. There were not many monks in the entire Jiangchao Temple. There were also not many good men and women worshipping Buddha. Chuanzong chanted Buddha's name and said somewhat sadly, "Martial nephew, the Longevity Town is the #1 town of the Buddhist sect in the hidden immortal continent. The incense of the Buddha is still too." Sigh, yes. Chuanzong Ping lamented. Disciple has also heard from the Western Paradise's martial uncles that the incense of the Western Paradise is at its peak. Disciple really admires it. Unfortunately, if there was no one who prayed for the Sutra of Nirvana, not to mention the incense of the Jiangchao Temple, even the golden body of the Guanyin Bodhisattva would be pushed down again. Praying for the Sutra of Nirvana? Chuanzong stared blankly and asked puzzledly, "What does that mean?" Martial uncle actually doesn't know? Chuanzong Ping was very surprised. This matter has already spread throughout the hidden immortal continent. Martial uncle hasn't heard of it? Amit Ba. Chuanzong was somewhat embarrassed. I ate and slept in the open all the way. When I rested, I recited Buddhist scriptures. I didn't have the chance to listen to other people's nonsense. So that's how it is. Chuanzong Ping's face was filled with reverence. Martial uncle, this is the right way to cultivate. I don't dare. Chuanzong quickly shook his head. My Buddhist sect has thousands of cultivation methods. Everyone has their own cultivation method. Martial uncle, this way please. Chuanzong Ping led Chuanzong to a Buddhist shrine in the Hall of Great Strength. He used his finger to point at a Buddhist decree emitting a faint Buddhist light and said, "This is the Buddhist decree of praying for the Sutra of Nirvana." However, until now, this Buddhist decree has not been taken down by anyone. Is it that difficult? Chuanzong was somewhat in disbelief. He unconsciously took 2 steps forward and looked at it. Amit Ba. Chuanzong Ping saw Chuanzong's gaze fall on the Buddhist decree and a smile appeared on his face. His whole body slowly retreated and the whole world stopped here. After an unknown period of time, Chuanzong's gaze moved away from the Buddhist decree. He then turned his head and looked at the golden body of Guanyin Bodhisattva on the Jiangchao Ridge. The silk on the golden body fluttered in the wind. Chuanzong's gaze then turned to the west, the far west. Finally, his gaze fell on the Buddhist decree and a firm expression appeared on his face. Amit Ba. Although it's 1,000 miles, although it's 10,000 miles, the Buddha is in this poor monk's heart. 1 step, 10 steps, what else can I ask for in the Western Paradise? Since disciple Chuanzong has already made a great wish for Guanyin Bodhisattva, disciple is willing to take down the Buddhist decree of the Buddha Lord. Then my Buddha's Buddhist light will spread throughout the hidden immortal continent. As he spoke, Chuanzang raised his hand and placed it on the Buddhist decree. Although the Buddhist light was faint, it was also endlessly tenacious. However, this Buddhist light could block the hands of thousands of bodhisattvas but could not stop Chuanzang. Chuanzang's hand touched a corner of the Buddhist decree. Wait! At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the originally silent Jiangchao temple. Chuanzang was slightly stunned. He turned his head and saw a faint shadow squeezing out from the crack of the door. Wasn't that Xiao Hua, who tried his best to pass through the Longevity Town and had no choice but to use all of his magical powers to enter the Jiangchao temple from the sealed void? Chuanzang was stunned when he saw a monk with a small nose and small eyes. This was because although he had never seen this face before, an inexplicable sense of familiarity arose from the bottom of his heart. He could not help but ask curiously, "Junior brother, do you have any orders?" Xiao Hua saw that Chuanzang's hand was already on the Buddhist decree and naturally knew that the matter had reached the final step. He wanted to say a lot of things, but he also knew that no matter how many things there were, someone would not let him say them. He only opened his mouth and said, "Seeking the sutra in the Western paradise is extremely risky." Have you thought it through? Even though Xiao Hua had only said a few words, the deep concern in his voice struck Chuanzang's heart harder than any hypocritical concern in the world. However, Chuanzang only smiled faintly. He turned his head to look at the Buddhist decree and replied, "Although this poor monk does not have the cultivation of Buddhism, this poor monk is still a disciple of Buddhism. Now that Buddhism needs someone to go through water and tread on fire, why can't this disciple be the person who steps into the sea of fire?" Xiao Hua still wanted to say something, but the difficulty in Chuanzang's words showed that this was his own choice. There was no coercion or temptation. Since this was the case, Xiao Hua did not have too many reasons to stop him. After all, Chuanzang's path was still up to him to walk. Alas! Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. His figure stood there and gradually solidified. Boom! Chuanzang's hand slightly exerted force. A pillar of Buddhist light shot up into the sky. Thousands of heavenly flowers were born from the void shattered by the pillar of light. Following the heavenly flowers, many fairies appeared. After the fairies, many small worlds emerged from the heavenly flowers. Billions of Buddhas were chanting the scriptures of Buddhism in the small worlds. Following this Buddhist light, the imprisonment of the entire Longevity Town suddenly disappeared. Xiao Hua's feet also firmly stepped on the ground. Amitabha! Amidst the soaring Buddhist light, Manjushri Bodhisattva appeared riding on an azure lion. His compassionate face revealed a well-thought-out plan. The voice of Manjushri Bodhisattva resounded in the Longevity Town. "Chuanzang, you have taken down the Buddhist decree. This time, the heavy responsibility of seeking the scriptures in paradise falls on your shoulders. This trip has to cross thousands of mountains and rivers. You have to experience difficulties and obstacles. The most important thing is that you have to walk this 1,000,000 miles of road step by step. You can't use any supernatural power beyond ordinary people. Do you have the determination? Disciple Chuanzang is a Bodhi monk. I don't have any supernatural power." Chuanzang's voice was originally low, but at this time, under the Buddhist light, it was like thunder. Not only did it resound in the River Tide Temple, it also resounded in the Longevity Town, and spread to the entire Yuzhou and even the 9 regions of the hidden immortal continent. Disciple came to River Tide Temple from Jinshan Temple, relying on disciple's feet, step by step. Now, I'm just going back to ask my Mahayana Sutra to come to the hidden immortal continent. Whether it's 10 years or 100 years, disciple is determined to let my Buddhist light spread all over the hidden immortal continent. Amitabha, Amitabha. The entire Longevity Town was filled with Buddhist light. It was peaceful and jubilant. Chapter 4060. Xiao Hua, who was standing at the Rivertide Temple, stared blankly at this magnificent scene. He couldn't help but feel bitter in his heart, because everything was planned early on, everything was arranged in advance. Under this grand occasion, who knew how much blood was hidden, how many schemes were hidden? Perhaps this grand occasion was the beginning of the light of Buddha, but who knew if this was the end of the light of Buddha's annihilation? Who knew how many people would fall in this so-called grand occasion, and who would care about the protagonist of this grand occasion? In the light of Buddha, monks filed out of the hall of great strength. At the edge of the chi of righteousness, Confucian cultivators wearing tall hats and robes came from afar. It was as if the killing intent of immortals and Buddhas that had accumulated for decades disappeared the moment Xuanzang unveiled the Buddhist decree. It was as if the war between immortals and Buddhas was just a joke. When immortals and Buddhas were having an affair, Xiaohua suddenly felt filthy and felt that he was not worthy of such a noble ceremony. He turned his head indifferently and floated out of the Jiangqiao temple. It was not that no one noticed Xiaohua's departure, but the alert Confucian cultivators thought that Xiaohua was a test arranged by the Buddhist sect, and the Buddhist sect thought that Xiaohua was a chess piece of the Confucian cultivators. When they relaxed, Xiaohua had already disappeared before everyone's eyes. Xiaohua, who walked out of the Jiangqiao temple, had the opportunity to seriously examine the longevity town that wrote his legend. Unfortunately, the longevity town was completely different from Xiaohua's previous memory. The roadside tea shed disappeared, the store where Xiaohua bought grain disappeared, the store where Yuanya bought buns on credit disappeared, and even the intersection where Xiao Jian set up his divination stall disappeared. Xiaohua looked at it for a while and was already bored. He turned his head to look at the high Jiangqiao ridge, at the tall golden body of Guanyin Bodhisattva. Although the golden body was blocked by silk, the rich power of faith around it condensed into a mirror-like flowing light. Xiaohua had no doubt that as long as his Buddha relic Bodhi came out at this time, he would immediately be able to attain Bodhisattva's Buddha fruit. However, how could he dare to expose himself at this time? Guanyin Bodhisattva's Buddha fruit was different from other bodhisattvas. It could not be replicated. If it were not for the immortals and Buddhas crushing each other, how could an ordinary monk obtain so much power of faith? Of course, at this time, Guanyin Bodhisattva attained Buddha fruit and completely subverted the plan of seeking scriptures in paradise. This was directly the fuse of the war between immortals and Buddhas. Even the Mahavairakana revered one didn't dare to bear this responsibility, so how could Xiaohua risk universal condemnation? However, after a short while, Xiaohua once again looked towards the west thoughtfully. He thought to himself in bewilderment, Elysium doesn't seem to be in the west. Why did Luer look to the west before he took down the Buddhist edict? What does that mean? Forget it, go ahead. Xiaohua pondered for a moment, then felt a little disheartened. Luer is already grown up, he should walk his own path. When Xiaohua turned his head, his gaze landed on Liaojiang. It was from Liao River that he was rescued by Yuanya and brought to the Temple of River and Tide. At that time, his cultivation had not recovered, so he did not have the intention to explore Liao River. Now that he was standing in front of Liao River, he could not help but think of the sea eye of the West Sea and Liao River. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's figure flew up and headed towards the upper reaches of Liao River. Previously, some grains were planted on both sides of Liao River, but now it was flat and clean. The villagers planted Bodhi trees and sunflower lotuses, making it look lush and green. Xiaohua flew up for hundreds of miles. Suddenly, dragon vein Xiaohua trembled in his body and called out in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist, please stop." "Oh? What's wrong?" Xiaohua was slightly stunned. His figure stopped in midair, and he released his divine sense in confusion. He asked, "Could it be that the heavenly abode river dragon clan has appeared in Liao River again?" However, just as Xiaohua finished speaking, he felt a burst of joy in his heart, as if he had thought of something. "That's right." Dragon vein Xiaohua's voice was also ecstatic. "I sense the aura of the Yuzhou cauldron." "How is that possible?" Xiaohua's voice was also filled with disbelief. How could the Yuzhou cauldron be in Longevity Town? "Nothing is impossible." Dragon vein Xiaohua said with a smile. "Fellow Taoist previously fell into the void passage in the West Sea's eye, and then appeared in Liao River. If there wasn't a passage that led directly to the void here, how could fellow Taoist come here? Since there is a passage to the void here, it is naturally possible for the Yuzhou cauldron to be here. Moreover, at that time, I'm afraid that Kong Hongwu had already taken away the other 5 cauldrons, causing the Yuzhou cauldron to lose its effectiveness. That's why fellow Taoist was able to float out from the suppression of the Yuzhou cauldron. But Xiao Hua was somewhat hesitant. He turned his head to look in the direction of Longevity Town and said in a low voice, "At this time, the Longevity Town's immortal and Buddhist experts are all here, and the sutra seeking extreme bliss hasn't started yet. How could we dare to make a move here?" Fellow Taoist misunderstood. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua said with a smile, "It's impossible for us to make a move now. When the sutra seeking extreme bliss begins, the attention of the hidden immortal continent and the sutra seeking extreme bliss will follow Chuanzong out of Longevity Town. This Longevity Town will naturally be ignored, and it won't be too late for us to make a move then. And that's how it should be." Xiao Hua laughed mischievously. "Moreover, this time can't be too long. Otherwise, when those Buddhist experts turn their attention back from the sutra seeking extreme bliss and land on the river and tide temple, you and I will no longer have a chance." Fellow Taoist is wise. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua flattered. Xiao Hua made up his mind, and his figure no longer stayed. Like a meteor, he flew forward for another 1,000 li and rushed into the depths of Liao River. At the bottom of the river, he found a secluded place to hide. After waiting for several tens of days, Xiao Hua finally flew out from the bottom of Liao River. When he quietly released a strand of divine sense to explore Longevity Town, it was as he expected. Not only was the incense in the river and tide temple declining, even the entire Longevity Town appeared deserted. It was as he expected. Xiao Hua secretly clapped his hands. He knew that it wouldn't be long before this Longevity Town would become a boiling cauldron of voices. Now was the best time to collect the Yuzhou cauldron. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua had the experience of collecting the Shuzhou cauldron, so finding the Yuzhou cauldron was not troublesome. He dived into the depths of Liao River and found the Yuzhou cauldron's aura in just a moment. Fellow Taoist. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua was a bit surprised. The aura of this Yuzhou cauldron is slightly different from the other 8 cauldrons. Xiao Hua naturally didn't find any trace of the Yuzhou cauldron, nor did he know the difference in its aura. He asked curiously, "What's the difference?" The aura of this Yuzhou cauldron has a kind of indomitable feeling, as if the lifeline of the entire world is pressing on this Yuzhou cauldron. And Yuzhou has always been called the central region. It is the center of the 9 regions, and the Yuzhou cauldron has such an aura. This means that the Yuzhou cauldron is the center of the 9 cauldron great array. It is very likely that it is the earliest cauldron to be set up. Xiao Hua understood and explained, "If we have used the 9 regions cauldron before, when we set up the array again, we will also set up this cauldron first." With that, Xiao Hua followed Dragon Vein Xiao Hua's guidance and entered the ground. After searching for half a cup of tea, Dragon Vein Xiao Hua smiled and said, "I have already seen the Yuzhou cauldron. Fellow Taoist, congratulations on gathering the 9 cauldrons." Thank you for your trouble, fellow Taoist." Xiao Hua laughed. From now on, fellow Taoist can cultivate in peace. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua let out a low roar and flew out from Xiao Hua's body. Dragon patterns flashed all over his body and multicolored clouds overflowed. He opened his mouth and a mouthful of dragon breath fell into an inexplicable space. Wang wang. A burst of chime sounds came from the ground not far away, and then the entire earth shook violently. Quick! Soon there will be Buddhist experts coming. Xiao Hua saw that the Yuzhou cauldron had such a big movement and hurriedly urged Dragon Vein Xiao Hua. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. With a hiss, he stretched out his 5 claws and grabbed the Yuzhou cauldron. The dragon chi around his body surged, and a powerful earth chi was emitted. With a boom, he grabbed the Yuzhou cauldron. Then, Xiao Hua patted his forehead, and 8 cauldrons gushed out from the 5-colored true chi. A strong aura fell on the Yuzhou cauldron. The Yuzhou cauldron let out a cheerful roar and rushed into the 5-colored true chi. The cauldron became smaller and smaller, and was about to fall into the true chi. All of a sudden, a loud laughter rang out from not too far away from the Yuzhou cauldron. Xiao Hua was within 100 miles of the cauldron, and an overwhelming aura immediately surged out along with the laughter, completely sealing the space. Even the Yuzhou cauldron, which had fallen into the true energy, stopped in midair. Xiao Hua was shocked, and his divine sense swept towards the source of the voice like a hammer. Boom! A huge roar came from the distance, and Xiao Hua's divine sense was actually easily shattered by the person who came. The impact of this impact overturned the entire earth. Xiao Hua! It's really you! A tall Confucian cultivator wearing a green-gray Confucian robe appeared in front of Xiao Hua. You were the one who did the thing on Yaoi Mountain. Kong Hongwu was also killed by you. Master calculated everything, but he didn't expect that you, a Taoist cultivator in the late stage of nascent soul, would have so many helpers. You really have too many hidden methods. If not for this old man's interest, how could I have discovered your face after lying in ambush in Longevity Town for more than 10 years? Middle 7th level essence energy, Great Master. Sensing his unparalleled confinement power, sensing the bone-piercing clear light in the eyes of the person who came, Xiao Hua's heart trembled violently. How could he not know the other party's origin? A Confucian cultivator's Great Master was between the 6th and 7th level essence energy. This Confucian cultivator's Great Master was clearly at the middle 7th level essence energy, and his strength was almost comparable to a low-level sage of literature. Xiao Hua really didn't expect that the Immortal Palace would send a Great Master who was second only to the Sage of Literature. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua roared, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws as he pounced towards the Confucian cultivator. That Confucian cultivator coldly smiled, and with a wave of his big sleeve, countless inscribed law chains came from the void, and pounced towards Dragon Vein Xiao Hua like an even more rampant python. Clang! Just as Dragon Vein Xiao Hua was about to be bound by the chains, a dazzling swordlight chopped down. This swordlight was so sharp, and the 5 qi contained within the swordlight was even more so like boiling water, breaking apart this Confucian cultivator's confinement in one blow. Not only that, Xiao Hua was shocked. He rubbed his hands together, and a thick crystal light frantically poured into the space between his 5 fingers. Within 100 li of Xiao Hua, thunder erupted, and each lightning bolt was stronger than a horned dragon as it pounced towards the Great Master. Chapter 4061. Facing Xiao Hua's lightning, the Confucian cultivator turned a deaf ear to it. With a wave of his sleeve, countless inscription chains appeared and blocked the lightning. Facing Xiao Hua's sword qi, the Confucian cultivator was unable to remain calm. 5 qi's unification? You actually know the 5 qi's unification. Xiao Hua's 5 qi's unification was naturally not an ordinary 5 qi's unification. As soon as the Confucian cultivator saw it, he found it strange. His eyes lit up. Could it be, this 9 cauldron is really useful? It was also at the same time that the sword light split open the shackles. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua suddenly turned around and entered Xiao Hua's body. At the same time, that true qi that was like a waterfall swept up the 9 cauldrons and entered Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua practically didn't stop at all. Taking advantage of the fact that the spatial shackles were split open by the shocking sword strike, he urged his magic power and activated the earth escape technique, turning into a stream of light and disappearing without a trace. Want to leave? How can it be so easy? The Confucian cultivator sneered. He raised his hand and a 3-colored true qi flew out. In an instant, the ground within several hundred miles was frozen. A bone-piercing cold air rushed out from the 3-colored true qi. Io! The Confucian cultivator stretched out his hand. His arm turned into a shadow and expanded along with his true qi. However, just as he stretched out his hand, a look of surprise appeared on his face. What kind of earth escape technique is this? As he spoke, an awe-inspiring aura gushed out from the void around the scholar. His figure suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in Liao River, 100 miles away. Unfortunately, just a moment before the scholarly cultivator's figure appeared, Xiao Hua's figure also created a ray of light in the Liao River and rushed out of the Liao River. This Xiao Hua is really remarkable. The Confucian cultivator's face was a little surprised, but he still looked like he had a card up his sleeve. He thought to himself, looking at his strength, I'm afraid he has already reached the upper 6th grade. It's only been a few decades, but his cultivation has advanced so much? Could it be that he was already at the 6th grade when he participated in the Jade Pavilion meeting? Grand Mist Ancestor, oh Grand Mist Ancestor, you've really set up a grand scheme. Xiaohua rushed out of Liao River in a panic. He simply didn't have time to identify the direction. True essence surged all over his body, and lightning appeared under his feet. Immediately, huge waves were set off on Liao River, and Xiaohua's figure turned into a thunderbolt as he rushed out in a certain direction. In just a few breaths of time, a blurry and indistinct human figure similarly flew out from Liao River, and like a strand of multicolored light, it followed behind Xiaohua. At the same time, in the direction of the Longevity Town, in the Jiangchao Temple, dozens of Buddhist consciousnesses were like a gust of wind that swept across the sky and chased after them. Similarly, outside the Jiangchao Temple, there were also several Buddhist consciousnesses that streaked across the sky and chased after them. Those celestial and Buddhist experts who had not left Longevity Town were puzzled. The sutra seeking of nirvana had already begun. Why were there still people stirring up trouble here? Xiaohua's figure flew in midair. Lightning flashed out from his dantian from time to time. Along with this lightning, Xiaohua's lightning escape speed continuously increased, and the Confucian cultivator chasing after him started to slow down after using teleportation a few times. But this Confucian cultivator's Buddhist consciousnesses were truly formidable. No matter how Xiaohua escaped, he would always feel a pair of eyes closely staring at him from behind. Seeing the surrounding scenery begin to distort, Xiaohua knew that his lightning element 3 realms had already reached its limit. Then he heard the sound of thunder from the lightning element 3 realms, which was like true heavenly thunder resounding through the sky. This sound of thunder frightened some cultivators that occasionally passed by, causing them to hastily dodge. Seeing this, Xiaohua suddenly felt a trace of unease in his heart. Not good. This Xiao was careless. That Confucian cultivator is a 7th level essence energy great master. Since he laid an ambush near the Yu province cauldron, how could this Xiao escape so easily? He must be afraid that fighting with this Xiao near Longevity Town would attract the attention of the Longevity Town's Buddhist sect, so he deliberately let this Xiao escape. And even if this Xiao escaped from Liao River, I should have taken advantage of the current and directly flew to the Jiangchao Temple. Even if I can't get the protection of the Jiangchao Temple's Buddhist sect's senior monks, I can only make that Confucian cultivator hesitate to attack me. Xiaohua understood at this time, but it was too late. That Confucian cultivator's strength was much higher than his. He had already sealed the area behind him, so how could he be allowed to turn around again? Xiaohua's current plan was to run as far as he could and see if he could shake off the Confucian cultivator in the end. Wang. When Xiaohua's lightning escape reached the 3rd day, seeing that the distorted space had already reached the point of tearing, suddenly Xiaohua's body began to give birth to a powerful tearing force. This tearing force was like thousands of small hands grabbing Xiaohua's body at the same time, wanting to tear his body apart. At the same time, the sound of thunder resounding through the sky began to sharpen, and the surrounding lightning began to flicker crazily. This guy, what kind of trick does he have? The Confucian cultivator chasing behind Xiaohua was a bit embarrassed. At first, he wanted to chase Xiaohua to a place where no one else would go because he was afraid of the Jiangchao Temple's Buddhist sect. But in the end, Xiaohua's true essence was abundant. Although he didn't use the Dao sect's instant shift to escape, his flying speed was far beyond that of ordinary cultivators. As a 7th level essence energy martial grandmaster, he actually couldn't catch up, and even showed signs of chasing further and further away. Now, seeing the crazy lightning around Xiaohua's body, he felt that something was wrong. Seeing that the lightning around Xiaohua's body was different, how could he dare to be negligent? He patted his own head. Wang. With a clear sound, 3-colored true essence fell into the sky, triggering the noble qi within 1,000 miles. The entire sky suddenly began to freeze, and thumb-sized ice fragments appeared in the air. Within this ice, everything began to quiet down, and the sound of thunder also began to subside. Seeing that his lightning escape was on the verge of advancing, but was stopped by this Confucian cultivator, Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and coldly said, "Domain power? Good, let's see how this Xiao will break your domain." As he spoke, he rubbed his hands together, and thumb-sized runes fell into the void. A strange fluctuation spread out from Xiao Hua's body. Wherever the fluctuation went, most of the ice fragments were shattered. Although the Confucian cultivator urged his true qi to repair the domain, the large expanse of ice seemed to have seen the sun and melted one after another. Dao Sex Xiao Hua, you're really powerful." The Confucian cultivator exclaimed in admiration and opened his mouth. Boom! A light blue glow gushed out, and a simple halberd engraved with inscriptions fell into the void. Heavy noble qi pillars fused into the halberd without the Confucian cultivator's urging. The corner of Xiao Hua's mouth slightly twitched, and he hurriedly urged his body to dodge to the side. But at this time, the domain that was previously shattered by the lightning suddenly became much harder, and with a ka sound, it blocked Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua didn't have time to urge the lightning, and a fierce wind was born from the void, piercing towards Xiao Hua's heart. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his fist, and with a boom, it landed in the air, and the powerful impact produced an ear-piercing roar. In the void, a long halberd phantom condensed from thousands of noble qi was shattered by Xiao Hua's punch. Not good. Xiao Hua shattered the illusion, but he didn't show the slightest bit of complacency. Instead, he revealed a dignified expression. Sure enough, along with the chaotic noble qi, tiny vortexes were formed. The original body of the simple and unadorned halberd strangely revealed a malevolent expression in front of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua hastily dodged the halberd, but the seemingly pointless halberd pierced into his shoulder. The halberd fell, and a bone-piercing chill appeared. Inscriptions that looked like tiny ice fragments swarmed into Xiao Hua's body, and a sharp qi that could pierce through mountains madly pounced on him. Weng. Xiao Hua's Taoist golden light was defeated by this sharp qi, but at the same time the golden light dissipated, a bronze brilliance suddenly appeared, and within this bronze brilliance, there was even a wisp of silvery white. This brilliance was so solid that the thousands of inscriptions on the armor seemed to have crashed into a wall and shattered. In particular, although the simple halberd had pierced Xiao Hua's body several times, the cracks were quickly mended within the brilliance, and in a few breaths of time, they were completely healed. The Confucian martial grandmaster was flabbergasted. He looked on in disbelief and whispered, "Demon? Demon body?" He. Xiao Hua laughed nastily. He suddenly raised his arm, and his elbow slammed down on the halberd below him. Gotcha! Layers of cracks appeared on the surface of the simple halberd, and the entire halberd trembled rapidly, emitting a mournful cry. Damn it! How is this possible? How can he reach such a realm with just his body? Even if it's a demon body, it's still not enough. The expression of the scholar cultivator changed slightly. He was very clear about the power of his imperial implement. Seeing that Xiao Hua was able to defeat his imperial implement with just his physical body, then how could Xiao Hua's physical body be just the demon body that he had measured? It was even more powerful than the magic treasures of Taoist cultivators, right? The Confucian martial grandmaster recovered from his shock and hurriedly withdrew the halberd. His body once again emitted a faint buzzing sound, and the domain around Xiao Hua condensed again. No, this won't do. Xiao Hua frowned as he pondered. He urged the lightning to protect the area around him. Within a dozen li lightning flashed in this area, and all the ice that invaded the area was destroyed by the lightning. Although this Confucian martial grandmaster's domain is low level, it's still not something that I can resist. I might be able to protect myself from being controlled by him, but in the end, I can't escape. In the end, I'll still be trapped to death by him. While Xiao Hua was pondering, the Confucian martial grandmaster moved again. His body suddenly expanded, and a pillar of vast qi gushed out from the nearby space like a volcanic eruption. Moreover, the three-colored true energy that he urged before also formed three different colored subbodies around Xiao Hua. Each subbody showed a fierce power and firmly covered the sky within 1,000 li. Seeing the power of ice in the entire space rise again, the Confucian martial grandmaster slightly narrowed his eyes. He gently waved his left hand, and a light blue cold light disappeared into the air along with his true energy. At the same time, the three subbodies roared in unison. A pillar of vast qi once again condensed in the void and fell into the subbodies. For a moment, the vast power raged. Chapter 4062. Man has law, and heaven and earth are just. One of the subbodies chanted loudly. These words fell in the air and shattered one after another. Waves of awe-inspiring energy rushed into these broken words and turned into inscriptions. The inscriptions were recast one after another in this domain. In just a few breaths, a thick chain of inscriptions gradually formed. As soon as this chain of inscriptions appeared, the solemn and awe-inspiring laws appeared, completely sealing off the area within 1,000 miles. Even Xiao Hua's heart was straightened. Man has the law, and evil spirits must be repelled. Immediately after, the second body chanted again. These words formed another thick chain of inscriptions in the air, echoing with the one in front of him, forcing Xiao Hua to the point where it was difficult to even breathe. Man has law, and the people obey. The third subbody spoke. This time, the awe-inspiring energy was even more than before. The lightning near Xiao Hua was forced to shrink by half. Finally, the Confucian cultivator spoke. Man has law, and all things fall. With the appearance of the last engraved law chain, the entire sky of 1,000 miles was completely enveloped. The four chains pounced toward Xiao Hua from all directions. The engraved law chain was like the soul of the entire domain, causing Xiao Hua to be unable to break free. Even the lightning was suppressed to within 10 feet of Xiao Hua. You are the inspector of the immortal palace? Xiao Hua's face was pale. He stared at the somewhat familiar chains and said word by word, "What law and rules did I break that actually forced the great grandmaster of the immortal palace to take action?" He. The Confucian cultivator saw that the area within 1,000 miles was like an iron wall. The void was filled with awe-inspiring energy and he couldn't help but sneer. You are the leader of the thieves, leading the remnants of the Taoist sect to rebel. You even destroyed the destiny of the 9 regions and stole my hidden immortal 9 cauldrons. For such a great crime, a Confucian cultivator can kill you. Xiao Hua laughed. His eyes were full of ridicule as he looked at the falling chains and said, "Who is the thief who stole the country? Who is the thief who stole the cauldrons? I'm afraid no one knows better than you, right? You used the law and the essence of rules to do petty things. With such an illegitimate reputation, how can you trap me?" A trace of disdain flashed in the eyes of the Confucian cultivator. He urged the true energy in his body and scolded, "I want to be the law, I want to be the rules. You are an uninitiated Taoist sect. How can you understand the meaning of my Confucian cultivator?" The 4 chains of inscription were like horned dragons. They had already trapped Xiao Hua in an area of several tens of zhang around him, entangling each other as they fell down. Xiao Hua raised his head and laughed. Such a self-righteous world, how can it be the world? How could such an unscrupulous sun and moon be the sun and moon that the people wanted? Since that's the case, then let this Xiao change the world for the people. Ka. With a wave of Xiao Hua's left hand, a golden light mixed with a faint awe-inspiring aura flew out. That golden light soared into the sky and turned into a golden dragon. The golden dragon, like Xiao Hua's unwavering determination, split the impregnable law into 2 halves. Then, the golden dragon roared and pounced on the 4 chains. Those tens of thousands of inscriptions were almost simultaneously covered by the golden light. In this golden light, they first frantically counterattacked. Then the golden light pierced the inscriptions. These inscriptions were like tadpoles, and almost at the same time, all the inscriptions were split from the middle and split into 2 halves. Looking at the chain that was pretending to be a sheep's head but selling dog meat, it was actually split neatly into 2 by the ice-breaking intent. Spirit, Spiritual object? When the Confucian cultivator saw the power of the soaring dragon scissors, he couldn't help but groan. At the same time, greed appeared in his eyes, and he urged the true qi in his body again. However, before he could make a move, he saw Xiaohua raise his right hand. A sword gourd flashed, and a green and red jade appeared in the air. Quick! Xiaohua urged his true qi, and a spell appeared in his hand. On the sword gourd, a white light with a nose and eyes appeared. Not good. Seeing that his mind was blurred, the Confucian cultivator was shocked. Pung. Then, two almost colorless spirit execution yuan lights soared into the sky from the sword gourd and fell on the Confucian cultivator's head faster than lightning. The Confucian cultivator's figure immediately became sluggish, and the chilling aura within 1,000 miles also disappeared like a receding tide. Hee. Xiaohua sneered, but the spirit execution yuan lights slightly intertwined, and a thin, invisible blood mark appeared on the Confucian cultivator's neck. Puff! The Confucian cultivator's head fell, and true qi rushed out of his neck. Huh? Xiaohua looked at a lot of blood rushing out, and he couldn't help but stare blankly. At this moment, boom! Xiaohua's back suddenly emitted the sound of a mountain flood exploding, and a thin stream of water fell on Xiaohua's body at lightning speed. Damn! Although the stream of water was small, fear appeared on Xiaohua's face, and he hurriedly dodged. Boom! He only dodged a few inches, and the stream of water rushed into his body. Xiaohua's demon body, which had been tempered for a long time, emitted a pa sound in the stream of water, and a bloody hole several feet in size appeared under Xiaohua's right armpit. This bloody hole not only penetrated the right side of Xiaohua's body, but it also exploded into pieces, too horrible to look at. Immortal Palace's imperial equipment. The stream of water finally condensed into a diamond-shaped imperial equipment, and there was a glaring imperial character on the imperial equipment. Xiaohua couldn't help but exclaim in horror. Ha! The Confucian cultivator's complacent smile came out from his other body, and he looked at Xiaohua's pale face and said, "What's the use of a strong demon body? It's not like my Immortal Palace's imperial equipment hasn't killed demons." Ouch! This is the Imperial Star Stab. Just as the Confucian cultivator opened his mouth, an awe-inspiring aura also came out from his body, and it pounced on him with the force of 10,000 caddies. It was the depressing divine stab that Xiaohua released earlier. This depressing divine stab was the Immortal Palace's Imperial Star Stab, and it was extremely hidden in the Confucian cultivator's awe-inspiring aura. The Confucian cultivator's primordial spirit was already proud after teleporting to his body, and now he was caught off guard. Moreover, that body was condensed from the 5 Qis unifications of true Qi, and it was hit by the Imperial Star Stab, and it collapsed extremely quickly. Damn it! The Confucian cultivator's voice came out from another body. However, just as this voice came out, the lightning around Xiaohua's body flourished. Rumble! In the sound of thunder, Xiaohua's body once again turned into lightning. The Confucian cultivator's body was defeated, and the head of his main body was also chopped off. The sealed domain on all sides had already collapsed by half, and under Xiaohua's lightning attack, it collapsed even more. However, this wasn't the end of it. What made the Confucian martial grandmaster's mind crumble was that a beam of light several zhang wide suddenly appeared in front of Xiaohua. The domain that was already falling apart suddenly opened up a passage. The Confucian martial grandmaster simply couldn't see where the beam of light came from. Xiaohua had already turned into a bolt of lightning and streaked across the sky, instantly escaping from this domain. Damn it, this guy really has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. Especially that instant feat technique. It's simply a 7th grade elemental energy. No, it's simply an 8th grade elemental energy, upper rank. The Confucian cultivator cursed inwardly. That body hurriedly swayed and fell back into his main body, and the head that fell off also grew out again. His entire body rapidly shrank, and at the same time, his figure also turned into a multicolored light and chased after Xiaohua. However, at this time, the Confucian cultivator's flying speed was already a bit weaker than before. Looking at Xiaohua again, he was even more confident than before, and showed signs of increasing his speed again. Damn it! After chasing for a few more days, although the Confucian cultivator didn't catch up to Xiaohua, he didn't lose him either. When he saw Xiaohua's speed increase again, he secretly shouted in his heart, and at the same time, he took out an imperial tool from his bosom. This imperial tool was a triangular square box, and the box's exterior was roaming with multicolored clouds. The Confucian cultivator hurriedly said a few words to this box, and then turned the square box. On the square box's triangular edges, various scenes frequently appeared, and then the square box's triangular edges emitted an unpleasant rhythm, and a black shadow covered the square box. This old man wants to see where you can escape to. After the Confucian cultivator cast his technique, an indescribable sneer appeared on his face, and he put the square box into his bosom. It was also at this time, a strange sound came from afar, and two transparent spirit execution yuan rays rose up again. The Confucian cultivator's complexion changed, and his figure slightly stagnated. He raised his hand and patted his forehead, and three-colored true qi surged out, transforming into a water cherry blossom above his head. Ah! Xiaohua's mocking laughter came, and the spirit execution yuan rays that soared into the sky suddenly disappeared. It turned out that all of this was just Xiaohua's illusion technique. The Confucian cultivator flew into a rage. He had already chased for more than 10 days, and aside from using his domain to trap Xiaohua at the beginning, Xiaohua's figure had always been drifting around the edge of his domain. Whenever the Confucian cultivator teleported, Xiaohua would also teleport, and whenever the Confucian cultivator tried to use a secret technique to get closer, Xiaohua would change direction like a fish. In front of Xiaohua's rich escape experience and peerless escape technique, the roles of the two seemed to have changed. This Confucian cultivator was just a small cultivator of 5th grade essence energy. And this time, Xiaohua's feint increased the distance between the two again. This place seems to be the Qilin's training ground. Just as Xiaohua was desperately trying to escape, a slightly familiar scene appeared in front of Xiaohua. Xiaohua almost didn't hesitate, and his figure suddenly rushed into the sky, flying straight towards the location of the earth, fire, wind, and lightning. Even though Xiaohua was escaping with ease, his heart was also clenched. The other party was a 7th-level essence energy martial grandmaster, who was already on the verge of becoming a literary saint. In the previous battle in the high-altitude domain, Xiaohua had used up all his means and barely managed to escape. The strength of this opponent was the same as Ao Jian on the dragon boat. They had already begun to comprehend domains, and Xiaohua's every move was within their control. If it wasn't for unexpected methods, it would be very difficult for him to survive. Especially from this cultivator's mouth, Xiaohua knew that this cultivator already knew everything about Yaotai Mountain, and also knew that he had 9 cauldrons in his hands. Xiaohua even knew that this cultivator actually had a master behind him. In other words, if Xiaohua didn't kill this cultivator this time, he would be noticed by this so-called master, and it would be very difficult for him to find peace in the future, even if Xiaohua was now the Dragon Master of Dragon Island in name. Chapter 4063. However, as soon as Xiaohua thought about how he had to kill a Confucian cultivator whose strength was close to that of the sage of literature, he felt bitter. The heavens were playing a big joke on him. In the folded Jadeite legacy realm, the aftereffects of using the demonic saber had yet to be eliminated, and he had to face such a strong opponent again. Xiaohua really didn't know whether the heavens wanted to kill him or the Confucian cultivator following closely behind him. Seeing the astral winds and layers of earth, fire, wind, and lightning appearing in front of him, Xiaohua smiled bitterly again. Although the previous scene looked familiar, he couldn't be sure. However, seeing the earth, fire, wind, and lightning, Xiaohua could tell that this place was definitely not the Qilin's training ground. However, seeing the earth fire surging and the wind and lightning whistling, Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and slowly calculated. Although Xiaohua was calculating, his figure didn't stop, and he pounced on the astral winds like lightning. In the distance, the Confucian cultivator was somewhat bewildered. How could the earth, fire, wind, and lightning be a place where ordinary cultivators could come. Even if he was a patrol envoy, he absolutely wouldn't stroll around here in his free time. Of course, not strolling wasn't unexpected or fearful. The Confucian cultivator's figure was like the wind, and he still chased after him without hesitation. Xiaohua entered the earth, fire, wind, and lightning, and the wind and lightning blew all over his body, causing his skin to hurt. Obviously, the astral winds here were much stronger than the ones he encountered before. Xiaohua's body flashed with a bronze brilliance. In the brilliance, the lightning on his body resisted the wind and lightning, and he rushed through a passage in the earth, fire, wind, and lightning, gradually going deeper and deeper. Looking at the Confucian cultivator behind Xiaohua, at this moment, a treasured armor appeared around his body. The treasured armor was resplendent, and it easily blocked the astral winds outside the brilliance. There was simply no need to consume the Confucian cultivator's true qi. Damn it! Xiaohua also paid attention to his back, and he was even more helpless. There were countless treasures in the immortal palace, and having a treasured armor to resist the earth, fire, wind, and lightning was really nothing. While Xiaohua was secretly cursing, he opened his delirium eyes, and tried his best to find traces of space in the wind and lightning. However, after flying for half an hour, he saw bursts of thunder and lightning, and the astral winds became even more violent. Even with Xiaohua's strong physical body, there were some signs that he couldn't bear it, and the promised space crack still didn't appear. Xiaohua didn't hesitate to turn around and fly in another direction. The earth, fire, wind, and lightning were boundless, and there was no direction to speak of. This guy seems to have been looking for something for a long time. The Confucian cultivator, who was chasing after Xiaohua, saw Xiaohua turn around and secretly pondered, could it be that in this earth, fire, wind, and thunder, there is still an ambush for him? In view of Xiaohua's previous cunning, the Confucian cultivator couldn't help but become cautious. He once again urged his righteous qi to protect himself before he dared to chase after Xiaohua. At this time, the Confucian cultivator had already regarded Xiaohua as an equal opponent. He did not feel the slightest bit ashamed of being careful. Gotcha! In the distance, there were some strange movements in the wind and thunder, setting off a thunderstorm in the range of 100 miles. When the thunderstorm gradually calmed down, Xiaohua's figure actually disappeared within the thunderstorm. Ah? How is that possible? The Confucian cultivator was shocked. He was very clear about the power of the earth, fire, wind, and thunder. He couldn't even use teleportation, so how could Xiaohua disappear into thin air? Ambush! This was the Confucian cultivator's first thought. However, even after activating the eye-cleansing technique for a moment, he still couldn't find any clues. He had no choice but to charge into the thunderstorm. In the thunderstorm, the astral winds were even more devastating. Countless thunderbolts madly surged in one direction. When the Confucian cultivator's eye-cleansing technique fell into the astral winds, a thoughtful expression appeared in his eyes. The Confucian cultivator didn't dare to be negligent. He patted his forehead, and a strand of hair-like tricolored crystal flew out from between his eyebrows. It split into two parts in midair and fell towards the Confucian cultivator's nose. Shwa! The crystal entered his body, and his eyes, which were originally overflowing with clear qi, suddenly shone brightly. In the center of his two pupils, light spots like water cherry blossoms appeared. These light spots turned into a net that quickly covered his entire eyes. See, there's actually a spatial crack here. The Confucian cultivator, who had activated his secret technique, saw the spatial crack in the wind and thunder at a glance. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. How did he know? Could it be that he has more divine abilities? No. Even if this old man has another helper, I'm afraid it won't be easy to deal with him. The Confucian cultivator clenched his teeth, and a ferocious expression appeared on his face. Even if this old man's reputation is ruined, this time I absolutely can't let him escape from this old man's hands. After saying that, the Confucian cultivator didn't rush into the spatial crack. Instead, he took out the triangular imperial equipment again. After activating it, the Imperial equipment turned into the shape of an immortal bird and rushed into the earth, fire, wind, and thunder, disappearing in a moment. Watching the Imperial equipment fly away, the Confucian cultivator narrowed his eyes. With a wave of his hand, an immortal palace Imperial equipment similar to the Imperial shield appeared in his hand. He coldly said, Xiao Hua, this old man wants to see how you're going to escape in the face of 3 great grandmasters who are about to step into the sage of literature. After saying that, the Confucian cultivator's entire body suddenly flattened, twisting in the wind and thunder for a moment before rushing into the spatial crack. Rumble! A violent explosion came from the spatial crack. Although it was 2 different spaces, the explosion was really powerful, causing the wind and thunder near the spatial crack to sway. Then, the Confucian cultivator, who had previously calmly escaped into the spatial crack, once again escaped from the spatial crack. The brilliance on the treasure armor had dimmed a lot. The Confucian robe on his body was also tattered, and traces of flames were still burning on the righteous qi around his body. Boom! The huge righteous qi around the Confucian cultivator extinguished the remaining flames. His previously calm face was now somewhat distorted. Xiao Hua, you really deserve to die. What kind of talisman is this, to have such great power in the void? Then, the Confucian cultivator flew into the spatial crack again. The void inside the spatial crack was not particularly spacious, and the fire wave produced by the explosion of the fire talisman had just been extinguished. The Confucian cultivator's eyes flashed with brilliance, and he unhesitatingly chased after the only passage in the void. Xiao Hua, who was fiercely flying in front of him, was also helpless at this time. He also did not expect that the passage in the spatial crack would be so narrow that it would not be effective in avoiding the Confucian cultivator. The only thing he could do was to arrange more hidden attacks in the spatial crack, hoping to injure the Confucian cultivator. Rumble! From time to time, the sound of explosions would come from behind him. Xiao Hua's lips curled into a smile. He naturally knew that the first fire talisman could injure the Confucian cultivator by surprise, but the later fire talismans could only play the role of blocking for a moment. Therefore, Xiao Hua urged his body to quickly shuttle through the passage. Seeing that he was getting farther and farther away from the Confucian cultivator, Xiao Hua was slightly proud in his heart. Once he left the spatial crack, Xiao Hua would either set up an ambush to kill the Confucian cultivator or hide his body to hide. Xiao Hua was confident that his plan would succeed. But at this time, Xiao Hua's heart trembled for no reason. Not good. Xiao Hua was shocked. He finally understood what the palpitations he had encountered before were. The Confucian cultivator behind him might not be able to do anything to him, but this Confucian cultivator was not alone. The Confucian cultivator's help had already appeared. Moreover, from his trembling perception, the other Confucian cultivator should be coming from the other side of the spatial crack. Although Xiao Hua did not know how the Confucian cultivator had found his whereabouts, Xiao Hua knew that this should be the biggest crisis he had ever encountered. Xiao Hua hurriedly urged his true essence to fly forward amidst the rumbling thunder. Xiao Hua still had not thought of any countermeasures. What he needed to do was to quickly fly out of the spatial crack and not be blocked by the Confucian cultivator. In the time it took to smoke half a cigarette, Xiao Hua's eyes suddenly lit up, and a rather large space appeared in front of him. Xiao Hua was overjoyed and immediately rushed into it. However, as soon as he entered the space, he saw a 3-colored haze on the other side of the space in the distance, like the rising of dawn, rapidly spreading in his direction. Damn it! How could Xiao Hua still be able to calmly identify the direction? He slightly turned his head and rushed in another direction. At the same time that Xiao Hua discovered the Confucian cultivator, the other party also discovered him. The Confucian cultivator also urged his true essence to surround Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua had already seen clearly that the Confucian cultivator had a simple face, a tall crown on his head, a thin figure, and wore the same armor as the Confucian cultivator behind him. Woo! The Confucian cultivator flew for a moment, then his body suddenly emitted a similar rumbling sound. A three-colored true essence gushed out from the surface of his body. First, his figure blurred, then turned into a stream of light, and his speed suddenly increased by several times. Then, the true essence of the Confucian cultivator attacked Xiao Hua like a tide. The true essence was like a flying sword, tearing Xiao Hua to pieces. Xiao Hua saw that he could not avoid it, and patted his own head. Boom! True essence gushed out, and the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua rushed out of the spatial crack with a sword in his hand. At the same time, the green-robed Xiao Hua controlled his nascent soul and landed on the other side of the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua. As for Xiao Hua himself, he held the sword gourd in his hand and coldly looked at the Confucian cultivator. Humph! The thin Confucian cultivator coldly snorted, and the thousands of true essences suddenly condensed into real swords that rushed toward Xiao Hua. It was even more powerful than the 10,000 swords returned to origin that Xiao Hua used before. Unfortunately, the current Xiao Hua was no longer an ignorant person. The green-robed Xiao Hua rubbed his hands together, and the lightning was even more rampant than the sword light. It was born in the spatial crack, and not only did it counter the sword light, it also destroyed the thin Confucian cultivator's true essence. How can the spatial crack produce such a strong lightning? The thin Confucian cultivator was slightly startled, and the true essence in his body once again gushed out, and the flying sword became even brighter in the lightning. King! The Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua raised his sword, and the sword light was even more dazzling than the lightning. The sword intent was even more soul-stealing than the thousands of sword intents, and it seemed as if half of the spatial crack was going to be pierced through by the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's sword. The entire sword light fell on the thin Confucian cultivator's head. How is this possible? The thin Confucian cultivator was greatly shocked. Three colored true essences rushed out of his head and condensed into a silver pineapple flower. This silver pineapple flower was sparkling and translucent, and its entire body was silver white. Boom! The sword light fell, and the silver pineapple flower trembled slightly, and layers upon layers of strong fluctuations rippled in the spatial crack. Watch this old man! The thin Confucian cultivator was suppressed by Xiao Hua as soon as they met face to face, and he was somewhat angry from embarrassment. The silver pineapple flower suddenly bloomed in the air, and turned into a huge sword that was several zhang long, and chopped towards the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua. At the same time, the thin Confucian cultivator slightly raised his hand, and the spatial crack began to boil, and strands of sword light sealed Xiao Hua's surroundings. Chapter 4064. Whoosh! White light gushed out from the sword gourd, and the skinny Confucian cultivator's gaze suddenly became sluggish. Of course, in just a few breaths, an angry roar came from the Confucian cultivator's body. You dare! Just as the Confucian cultivator's gaze regained its clarity, and before he could do anything, two rays of soul execution yuan light pierced through the air and landed on his head. Damn it! Seeing the soul execution yuan light so powerful, the Confucian cultivator was somewhat frightened. He raised his fist and patted his chest. Swish! The Confucian cultivator opened his mouth, and a fist-sized sword splendor spurted out, meeting the soul execution yuan light head-on. Ka-ka-ka! The sound of metal clashing rang out, and Xiao Hua's soul execution yuan light was unexpectedly beaten back by this sword splendor. Not only that, the silver spinach that previously turned into a huge sword suddenly turned into an inch-long small sword and attacked Xiao Hua between his eyebrows. This small sword was different from the soul execution yuan light. It was formless and intangible, and space and distance did not seem to exist. In a split second, it had already pierced between Xiao Hua's eyebrows. Boom! Xiao Hua hurriedly urged his soul strands, but just as they came out, they were completely shattered by this small sword. Like a huge hammer, Xiao Hua's mind buzzed, and stars appeared in front of his eyes. At this moment, misfortune never comes alone. The huge sword still fell, and the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's body was distorted. Waves of true qi burst out from Xiao Hua's body, and soon Xiao Hua was deflated. Damn it! Xiao Hua urged God's guidance to stabilize his dizzy head, and secretly cursed in his heart, "I have many methods, but these methods can barely resist a Confucian cultivator at the 7th level of origin energy. And although these Confucian cultivators at the 7th level of origin energy don't have many methods, if one of these methods were to land on me, I wouldn't be able to withstand it." Previously, the Imperial Star Stab was like this, and now this Soul Sword attack is also like this. Thinking of the Imperial Star Stab, Xiao Hua became vigilant again. His figure suddenly turned into wind, and his hands waved, and lightning like swords slashed horizontally into the air. Boom! Another loud sound, and a thick chain was struck by lightning. On the chain, soared splendor like light. If it trapped Xiao Hua, it would be very troublesome. He, Taoist Master Xiao really has another method. No wonder Sun Qing wanted this old man to come and help. When the Confucian cultivator saw that his secret move had been seen through by Xiao Hua again, he couldn't help chuckling. Originally, this old master thought it was unnecessary, but now it seems that this old master really has to take action. Xiao Hua looked into the void and saw that the spirit-slaying vital light had been defeated by the Confucian cultivator's sword light. The Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua had also been defeated by the Confucian cultivator's 5 cheese unifications. However, the green-robed Xiao Hua's thunderbolt technique was still effective, temporarily preventing the entire space from being sealed by the Confucian cultivator. Xiao Hua's divine sense condensed in midair. His delirium eyes were already closed, and his naked eyes were swiftly sweeping through the pitch-black void. Both of you are great grandmasters who are about to break through the spirit returning to emptiness realm. I'm afraid it won't be long before you advance to the void refinement realm. At that time, the sage of literature will be at your fingertips. Seniors, why do you have to make things difficult for me? Xiao Hua said faintly. If this matter spreads out, where will the immortal palace's face go? He. The Confucian cultivator glanced at the struggling Xiao Hua on top of his head, and a thought-provoking smile appeared on his face. The sage of literature is within reach, but the star of literature is not. If not for a special opportunity, I'm afraid this old man can only stay in the sage of literature realm for a lifetime. But this old man heard that Taoist Xiao has the aura of 9 cauldrons. If an ordinary Confucian cultivator wants to enter the star of literature, 1 cauldron is enough. Why doesn't Taoist Xiao give 1 cauldron to this old man? People often say that a word is worth 9 cauldrons. Xiao Hua smiled coldly. When Confucian cultivators temper their incantations, 1 word is worth 9 cauldrons. 1 word is enough to become a star of literature. Senior neglects the essentials and focuses on the trifles. I'm afraid you've already lost your heart. How can you set foot on the star of literature? You boy, I didn't expect you to have a thorough understanding of the Confucian scriptures. The Confucian cultivator laughed loudly. Unfortunately, since there's a shortcut in front of me, why should this old man take the difficult path? There's a path on the mountain of books, and there's a path on the mountain of books. There's no end to the sea of learning. Xiao Hua sighed. You're a great grandmaster of Confucian cultivation, but you don't even understand such a simple principle? The Confucian cultivator tilted his head and said with a smile, "That's just a song to deceive children." You really believe it? This old man actually has something that I don't understand. Do you think you can persuade this old man with your glib tongue? Xiao Huan naturally didn't have such a childish plan. He was only taking advantage of his breath to find an escape route with his extraordinary spatial sense. Unfortunately, even this last hope of his was snuffed out by the Confucian cultivator. Just as the Confucian cultivator finished speaking, in the distant space, another 3-colored haze filled the air and rushed over. A small voice faintly came from the void. Sun Hao, this guy is too cunning. Don't talk to him. Did you bring your burning heaven furnace? Of course. Hearing this, the great grandmaster of Confucian cultivation, Sun Hao, raised his hand and clapped. A lid-like imperial equipment flew out. This imperial equipment was very simple and unadorned. There were only 3 fist-sized inscriptions, and Xiao Hua actually couldn't recognize these 3 inscriptions. Sun Cheng, this old man knew what you meant when I saw your message. Sun Hao said with a smile. Can't you see that this old man is trying to persuade Taoist Xiao to stay and wait for your earth-casting furnace? Good. Seeing the burning heaven furnace fly out, a smile appeared on Sun Cheng's face. This guy's body is comparable to a great demon. Without the burning heaven casting earth casting technique, it's hard to completely kill him. In this void. Sun Hao looked around with a somewhat awkward expression. Without waiting for Sun Cheng to speak, how could Xiao Hua, who saw that things weren't going well, dare to stay any longer? Although he had just seen a glimmer of life with his naked eyes, he still couldn't be sure. His body flashed with lightning again. The soul-punishing vital light and the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua all entered his body and fled towards the distant pitch-black darkness. At this time, where do you think you're going? Sun Cheng laughed loudly. He raised his hand and clapped. Strands of cold air flew out from the earth-casting furnace, instantly enveloping the entire void. Xiao Hua's lightning-like figure suddenly slowed down in this cold air. Sun Hao also clapped his hand. The burning heaven furnace above his head also flashed with silver light, intertwining with the cold air and enveloping the void. As soon as this gold qi and water qi intertwined, the entire void shook, as if it was about to collapse. Xiao Hua's originally slow figure was now crawling like a tortoise. Damn it! Xiao Hua cursed. Even his voice had been imprisoned, dragged out to an extreme length. Xiao Hua originally wanted to ambush and kill Sun Cheng in the void, but he didn't expect Sun Hao to arrive. Now that the two of them had joined forces, he was afraid that the one to be killed would be him. The void was filled with a silver brilliance and a light blue cold light. The two brilliances intertwined, not only creating a strong fluctuation that shook the void, but silver blue flames that looked like withered flowers were born one after another. These flames that filled the void didn't have any heat. Instead, they made people feel cold. However, these bone-chilling flames also had an inconceivable might. Xiao Hua's body, which had been tempered by the blood of the demon god, felt his muscles go numb the moment he touched these icy flames. Even the bronze color on the surface of his body began to melt, like a candle under the flames. Burning heaven casting earth technique. Xiao Hua chanted silently. He raised his head and looked up. At this moment, the burning heaven furnace had already become several hundred zhang in size and descended with a rumbling sound. Looking at the bottom of his feet, the earth-casting furnace had also become several hundred zhang in size and rushed up with a loud rumble. Sun Cheng and Sun Hao saw that Xiao Hua had already fallen into their trap. With a smile on their faces, they activated their subsidiary bodies. The two subsidiary bodies each spouted three-colored true qi onto the two imperial treasures. The two imperial treasures were already so powerful when they weren't combined. If they were truly combined, how could Xiao Hua survive? Moreover, now that the two great experts had joined forces to seal the void, it would be difficult for Xiao Hua to escape. In fact, there was no need to seal the imperial treasures. Xiao Hua already had no chance of survival. Now that things have come to this, don't even think about killing the enemy. Xiao Hua sighed. Let's escape from this void first. Xiao Hua had been holding back because he didn't want to expose his killing move. At this moment he actually had no other choice. Ayo! Xiao Hua patted his head. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua let out a roar and rushed into the void. Five-clawed true dragon? Sun Hao was shocked. He looked at Sun Cheng with some disbelief. Sun Cheng's face also showed surprise. Sun Hao shouted, Sun Cheng, how could he have the true dragon vein? Moreover, it's so pure? Sun Cheng's eyes showed a trace of gloominess. He said indifferently, at this moment, regardless of whether he has the true dragon vein or not, even if he is the descendant of a true dragon, can you still stop? Sun Hao, we will kill Xiao Hua. This true dragon vein, you and I will split it equally. Sun Hao slightly hesitated, then firmly nodded and said, okay. Sun Cheng naturally saw Xiao Hua's five-clawed true dragon vein long ago. However, he had selfish motives and didn't explain it to Sun Hao. The two masters both understood what the true dragon vein meant to Confucian masters. This true dragon vein's function was even more important than the 9 cauldrons in a certain aspect. However, there were always times when things went beyond one's expectations. Sun Hao had just nodded his head when a burst of inexplicable and obscure draconic language came out from Dragon Vein Xiaohua's mouth. Then, along with the draconic heavenly technique, draconic patterns appeared in the entire void. The draconic patterns rushed into the tens of millions of ice flames. Although they couldn't completely obliterate the ice flames, the powerful confinement force had already been reduced by 70%. Heavenly Dragon Language Technique? Impossible! Sun Cheng and Sun Hao both turned pale with fright. Their mouths were opened so wide that walnuts could be stuffed in. They were immortal palaces patrolling envoys. How could they not know what Heavenly Dragon Language Technique meant? This is not a bloodline true dragon vein technique. Sun Cheng saw the opportunity quickly. His face showed incomparable ecstasy again. He shouted madly, "This is a real 5-clawed true dragon." A real 5-clawed true dragon, that was something from Legends. Even on Dragon Island, it hadn't been seen for a long time. Greed appeared in Sun Cheng and Sun Hao's eyes again. Woo! It was also at this moment, when the two masters were preparing to use all of their abilities to capture the 5-clawed true dragon, Xiaohua spat out a wisp of dual-colored spirit fire from his mouth. Moreover, the dragon vein technique Xiaohua waved its body and rushed out of the void while carrying Xiaohua. Chapter 4065. Under the gazes of the two great grandmasters, wherever the spiritual fire went, it just happened to sweep away the remaining ice flames. Following the flight of Dragon Vein Xiaohua, it instantly rushed out a winding passage. This Xiaohua is really an unkillable cockroach. The two grandmasters looked at each other helplessly. Their hearts were filled with the same bitterness. Even the burning heaven casting earth technique was unable to trap Xiaohua. The two of them really didn't know what method to use to kill Xiaohua. However, the two of them also knew that Xiaohua only had the ability to escape when facing the two of them. He absolutely did not have the power to counterattack. As long as the two of them continued to chase, there would be a day when they would kill Xiaohua. Thus, the two of them did not hesitate to put away their imperial equipment. They urged their figures to teleport to the place where Xiaohua disappeared. The two of them were right, but they never thought that as early as hundreds of years ago, Taoist Jingyu of the Morning Rain continent had the same idea. Shan Xingzi and Taoist Du, he also had the same idea. Of course, this was the outcome of the three of them. It was also not what the two of them expected. Xiaohua originally did not find a suitable escape route. Now that he was being forced by the two grandmasters, he was already panicking and hungry. He could only fly in the direction he saw before. When he reached the edge of the space, Xiaohua hurriedly withdrew his dragon vein Dharma body and plunged into a small space passageway. "Brother Ordinary, please wait a moment. This Xiaohua is too cunning. This old man will go first." Sun Cheng hurriedly transmitted his voice from the space passageway. Unexpectedly, Sun Hao did not give way and replied, "Brother Jianzheng, don't be anxious. This old man has already arrived." While speaking, Sun Hao's figure distorted and fell into the space passageway. "Brother Ordinary," Sun Cheng hurriedly shouted, "be careful of Xiaohua's ambush." Following Sun Cheng's voice, rumble. There was a loud sound. The space passageway was shaking. In the midst of the explosion, Sun Hao dodged out of the space passageway with a dusty face. His face was green and red. Although he did not suffer any special injuries, his face had been torn off by Xiaohua and ruthlessly stepped on. "AI, Brother Ordinary is too impatient." Sun Cheng said very sincerely, "This Xiaohua is like a slippery loach. His strength can't be considered outstanding, but he has a lot of tricks up his sleeves and is full of schemes. This old man chased all the way and didn't gain any advantage either. All Taoist cultivators are like that." Sun Hao couldn't blame Sun Cheng. After all, Sun Cheng had already warned them and rushed to enter. He could only snort coldly and say, "They're used to being killed by us Confucian cultivators. They're like rats in the field, with countless holes to hide in." Hurry up and chase after him." After 2 or 3 sentences, the space channel had already calmed down. Sun Qing urged, "Brother Ordinary, you should still stay in front. However, you must be careful of that guy's traps whenever you take a turn." "Alright, I understand." Sun Hao nodded. "Since I already know, how can I still be afraid of him?" Then, the 2 grandmasters cautiously flew closer to the spatial tunnel. Xiaohua did not have the time to tidy up his emotions, nor did he have the time to repair his body. The imperial equipment of the Immortal Palace was very strange, and the demonic technique of the blood-dripping paradise was very difficult to repair. In particular, the burning heaven-casting earth technique had destroyed some of the surface of his body. Now, it was also very troublesome. Now, Xiaohua was only focused on one thing, and that was to methodically lay down fire talismans along the way. Even when he had just entered the tunnel, he had specially used the capital star formation technique to lay down hundreds of fire talismans. Within the space, the green-robed Xiaohua was using all his strength. One after another, extremely powerful fire talismans were mixed with the newly comprehended lightning technique of Xiaohua. This spatial passage was rather strange. It was like an ordinary winding path in the mountains, twisting and turning. It was also thanks to Xiaohua's innate spatial sense that every time he was about to crash into an inexplicable barrier, he would stop. And every time such a situation occurred, Xiaohua would unhesitatingly place down a fire talisman. Thus, Xiaohua flew in front of his head. Behind him, firecracker-like explosions could be heard. However, after 4 hours, Xiaohua's good luck was completely exhausted. He had reached the end of the spatial tunnel, and this end was like a dead end with no exit. Xiaohua hurriedly turned around, trying to find another way out based on his memory. However, he had only returned a few hundred feet when his figure froze. This was because after entering the tunnel, Xiaohua had not encountered any other forks. In other words, there was only one way out of this spatial tunnel. With a quick thought, Xiaohua immediately flew to the end of the spatial tunnel. He slapped his forehead with the back of his hand and opened his delusion breaker Dharma Eye. A fist-sized silver beam of light shot out from the Dharma Eye and landed directly on the spatial barrier. Woo-woo! In the silver light, thumb-sized vortexes appeared. When the vortexes deepened, they all gathered together. Xiaohua waved his hand and a bronze light flashed on his arm. A several feet-long spatial crack was torn open by Xiaohua. Hua-hua! Just as the spatial crack opened, a gust of wind and rain poured in. The sparkling raindrops revealed a salty and moist aura. Xiaohua glanced at it and did not hurry to fly out. Instead, he retreated 100 feet. Seeing that there were still some explosions in the distance, the delirium breaker Law Eye once again produced a silver beam of light that landed on the spatial barrier. Unfortunately, this time, the silver beam of light had already penetrated a few feet deep. Xiaohua's hands tore the spatial barrier apart, but he did not see any aura from outside the spatial barrier. Damn it! Xiaohua's plan to set up a trap fell through. He was just about to fly to the side to try again, but unfortunately, a somewhat weak clear light swept over. Xiaohua's figure flashed in fright and he tore open the spatial crack that had already mostly closed and flew out. Where is this? Xiaohua flew out of the void and released his divine sense. He saw that the sky was filled with red clouds. Bursts of lightning flashed in the red clouds, and the pouring rain flashed a strange light in the night sky. Xiaohua looked around and did not know where to go. He rushed towards a certain place. Wang. Xiaohua had only just rushed out 100 zhang when his divine sense was suddenly blocked by a solid barrier. That barrier was like a heavy hammer that struck his divine sense out of nowhere. Although Xiaohua had already tempered his divine sense to the point that it was like an iron hammer, this tremendous force of impact shook Xiaohua's divine sense and caused it to roll back. Waves of indescribable force crashed into his Naiwan palace. Not good. Xiaohua was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. Although he could not see clearly whether the person in the distance was friend or foe, he did not investigate further. His figure suddenly rushed upwards, wanting to escape from this dangerous place. "You are Xiaohua?" A slightly surprised voice came from all directions. This voice was very deep. No, how did you come out from here? Could it be that Sun Jianjing's message was wrong? Damn it, is there a mistake? Xiao Hua's heart was completely flustered. 2 Confucian martial grandmasters were not enough, and a third actually came? Could it be that this Xiao is going to lose his life here? Xiao Hua did not answer, but that did not mean that the Confucian martial grandmaster who came to capture Xiao Hua would not make a move. Following that voice, pillars of vast qi rose up within 1,000 li. These pillars of qi condensed into small yellow dots the size of mung beans in front of Xiao Hua's eyes. These small dots emitted vigorous and solid fluctuations, completely enveloping the area within 1,000 li. Although Xiao Hua did his best to urge the lightning, his figure still slowed down. Xiao Hua's heart turned cold. He coldly turned his head and looked at the space enveloped by the qi of earth. There was not a single drop of water in this space. Then, his gaze crossed the space and landed on a short and fat Confucian martial grandmaster in the distance. This Confucian martial grandmaster was not only fat, but his nose and eyes were also small. There were even 2 mustaches at the corners of his mouth that resembled a rat's tail. In that case, I'll kill you first. Xiao Hua made up his mind. He suddenly turned around and flew at an angle to another place. Why is this guy flying over there? Seeing Xiao Hua turn around and fly to another place, the Confucian martial grandmaster was slightly taken aback. He looked in that direction with some astonishment. However, a moment later, the Confucian martial grandmaster's doubts disappeared. After all, within his domain, no matter which direction Xiao Hua went, it was impossible to escape from his grasp. Moreover, there was nothing special about the place Xiao Hua fled to. However, for safety's sake, the Confucian martial grandmaster still urged his figure. His figure flashed and appeared not far from Xiao Hua. The Confucian martial grandmaster revealed his figure. He raised his hand and patted the top of his head. A majestic subsidiary body appeared. Moreover, the subsidiary body grabbed Xiao Hua with its big hand, just like the hand of a Taoist martial grandmaster's nascent soul. The qi of earth on the big hand surrounded Xiao Hua's body. The true qi produced a tyrannical imprisoning force, wanting to seal Xiao Hua's meridians. Roar! Xiao Hua roared. A bronze brilliance flashed around his body. He did his best to resist the Confucian martial grandmaster's imprisonment. However, because the bronze brilliance was already injured, its brilliance dimmed. Many places on the surface of his body actually began to collapse. It's only... Seeing Xiao Hua's body being easily defeated, the Confucian martial grandmaster laughed loudly and slowly withdrew his arm. Xiao Hua was secretly delighted. He quietly waited for the Confucian martial grandmaster to approach. However, after a few moments, the Confucian martial grandmaster's arm stopped. The other hand was also raised. It looked like it wanted to grab the other side of Xiao Hua's body, wanting to tear Xiao Hua apart. Roar! Xiao Hua roared again. As he roared, he patted the top of his head. The dragon bloodline Xiao Hua once again rushed out of his body. The true dragon might frightened the Confucian martial grandmaster so much that his face changed wildly. Immediately after, the dragon bloodline Xiao Hua used the heavenly dragon technique to destroy the nearby space seal. When the space collapsed, the Confucian martial grandmaster's subsidiary body also trembled violently. Xiao Hua took the opportunity to escape from the subsidiary body's big hand. A 5-clawed true dragon? This Confucian cultivator was just as shocked as Sun Hao and Sun Cheng. His jaw almost dropped to the ground. While his eyes revealed extreme greed, his figure suddenly closed in. His sun body also reached out with his big hand, wanting to capture dragon vein Xiao Hua. Woo! Just as the Confucian martial grandmaster was about to grab the dragon bloodline Xiao Hua, an inexplicable beam of light suddenly blasted towards the Confucian martial grandmaster. The Confucian martial grandmaster was frightened and hastily dodged. Although the Confucian martial grandmaster's robe was only damaged by the beam of light, the Confucian martial grandmaster was still abnormally ashamed and angry. However, what made the Confucian martial grandmaster even more puzzled was that after the beam of light, Xiao Hua's figure suddenly closed in and quickly rushed over. Chapter 4066. Although the Confucian cultivator was puzzled, how could he dare to let Xiao Hua approach him? He looked at dragon vein Xiao Hua with some reluctance, and his figure suddenly faded. The Confucian cultivator was about to teleport in his own domain. At this moment, the Confucian cultivator was stunned because Xiao Hua suddenly stopped. After dragon vein Xiao Hua returned to his body, he waved his hand and took out a jade bottle. He poured the medicinal pills in the jade bottle into his mouth. What is he doing? Although the Confucian cultivator's figure was distorted, he didn't completely disappear. He looked at Xiao Hua's strange behavior and muttered to himself. What made the Confucian cultivator feel strange was that when Xiao Hua took the medicinal pills, the previous pillar of light soared into the sky again. However, this time, 100 nascent souls of different colors rushed out like fireworks, breaking through the already thin domain and surrounding the short and fat Confucian cultivator. These 100 nascent souls fell in the air and immediately arranged the Du Tian Xing formation according to Xiao Hua's thoughts. They sat cross-legged in the air and closed their eyes, facing the Confucian cultivator. Rumble! Hundreds of heavenly lightning bolts carrying the might of heaven and earth fell from the sky at the same time as the nascent souls appeared. Not only did they imprison the nascent souls, but they also imprisoned Xiao Hua and the Confucian martial grandmaster. The power of the first tribulation of the 100 scattered nascent souls was really great. The Confucian cultivator looked up and saw that the immature heaven and earth imprisonment had completely scattered his domain. There was also the lightning in the sky that was originally raging with thunder. How could he not know what Xiao Hua was thinking? He made a prompt decision, and a dark red color appeared on his face. Then, blood-yellow true qi gushed out from the surface of his body. The sub-body that couldn't move because of the confinement force suddenly stretched out a blood-colored arm. Bang bang bang. It successively crushed a dozen nascent souls that were facing the initial tribulation. These dozen nascent souls exploded, and the power overflowed. Not only was the power of the Du Tian Xing formation greatly reduced, but the imprisonment of the heavenly tribulation also weakened a lot. The Confucian cultivator felt his sub-body loosen, and then a sinister smile appeared on his face. He said, "To catch bandits, first catch the king. Xiao Hua, this old man will catch you first." As it speaks, that huge sub-body stretches out its arm and pinches towards Xiao Hua's main body. Woo-woo! Before the scholarly cultivator's arm could fall, Xiao Hua's body suddenly emitted an extremely strange fluctuation. As soon as this fluctuation fell into the air, it immediately shattered the scholarly cultivator's domain and even spread out rapidly into the distance. Moreover, from Xiao Hua's body, a powerful aura spread out, and his divine sense broke free from the shackles and spread out in all directions. A sense of foreboding welled up in the scholar's heart. Hee. Xiao Hua laughed coldly and took out another jade bottle. He tilted his head back and poured the medicinal pills inside into his mouth. Wu Han, quickly run. Right at this moment, Sun Cheng and Sun Hao appeared at the place where Xiao Hua had fled from earlier. When the two of them saw the situation before them, they were scared out of their wits. Sun Cheng even warned, "This is the initial tribulation of dispersing nascent soul. Not good. Brother Chenghua, dodge quickly. This is the heavenly tribulation of a Taoist cultivator's advancement. Xiao Hua seems to be advancing." Sun Hao shouted, "Damn it, what kind of freak did I encounter?" When the short and fat cultivator named Wu Han heard this, he trembled with fear. How could he still care about bullying Xiao Hua? His figure swayed and he was about to teleport away. Unfortunately, his figure only dimmed for a moment before reappearing in the same place. The initial tribulation of 100 dispersing nascent souls had already descended and the entire space was sealed. How could a scholarly cultivator great grandmaster escape from here? Others may not know what dispersing nascent soul is and what the initial tribulation of dispersing nascent soul means, but these three people are the inspectors of the immortal palace. They are most exposed to the strange things of the hidden immortal continent, especially regarding the cultivation methods of the Taoist sections. They know a lot. Seeing that they actually encountered the legendary dispersing nascent soul initial tribulation, How could the three of them not tremble with fear? Wu Han, who was among them, complained incessantly. He raised his hand and patted. 3 defensive imperial equipment flew out from his Jianquan pouch. One was a palm-sized shield, one was a golden armor, and the last one was a large dragon scale. Wu Han spat out 3 breaths of qi in succession. The palm-sized shield emitted a weng-weng sound and suddenly expanded. The inscription on the armor, which should have triggered the vast void qi pillar, was now only the size of a thumb. It was barely able to trigger the wisps of vast void qi from the cracks in the void. However, the inscription on the armor still emitted the light of law, fighting against the heaven and earth imprisonment to protect one side of Wu Han. Wu Han's armor was triggered by true qi. It was completely golden, as if it was made of gold. Dragon and phoenix inscriptions faintly appeared on the armor and slowly flowed in the golden light. Wu Han didn't dare to be negligent. He put on the armor, then raised his hand and patted. 3-colored true qi gushed out. An earthy yellow secondary body of several dozen feet in size condensed on top of his head. The dragon scale, which was triggered by true qi, emitted a faint dragon qi and fell into the secondary body's hand. The secondary body supported the secondary body with both hands. The secondary body actually turned into a thick, characteristic dam of several dozen feet in size and laid horizontally on top of the secondary body's head. After doing all this, Wu Han's face turned pale. That short and fat body seemed to have thinned out of thin air. The area within 1,000 miles was shrouded by hundreds of initial tribulations of scattered nascent souls. The area within 100 miles where Wu Han and Xiao Hua were sitting was the focus. The noble qi in the void had already been imprisoned. If Wu Han wanted to mobilize true qi, he could only rely on his middle dantian. The 3 imperial equipment and the secondary body that appeared were all the results of Wu Han's struggle with the heaven and earth prison. Wu Han fiercely glanced at Xiao Hua, whose body's pressure was getting stronger and stronger. His divine sense was also getting more and more majestic. He gritted his teeth, his gaze swept across the sky and landed on Sun Hao and Sun Cheng in the distance, who were somewhat at a loss. At this time, the entire space was shrouded by the thunder tribulation. All the images appeared distorted. Sun Hao and Sun Cheng saw the imperial equipment that Wu Han took out. There was a trace of comfort in their panic. Sun Cheng whispered, "Brother Ordinary, did you see the 2 imperial equipment that Wu Han just took out?" "Of course I saw it." Sun Hao's expression didn't break away from the shock, but his tone was filled with jealousy. "Isn't that armor the battle immortal armor in the Immortal Palace's treasury? Isn't that dragon scale the ancient Taoist magic treasure Black Nightshade?" "That's right, I really don't know how Wu Han got these 2 treasures." Sun Cheng echoed, facing the initial tribulation of these 100 scattered soul cultivators. This old man has no confidence in escaping. But if Wu Han has these 2 treasures, I'm afraid he has a 40% chance. The battle immortal armor was used by the previous battle immortal general. Its defensive ability has been tested in a great battle. It should be able to protect Wu Han's body. Sun Hao frowned and replied, "And the Black Nightshade is the scale armor left behind by the ancient Earth Holy Dragon on the Dragon Island. It was forcibly taken away from the Dragon Island by the ancient Taoist magic sect and refined into a defensive magic treasure. When the Taoist magic sect was destroyed, it was tempered into an imperial equipment by the Immortal Palace. Its defensive ability is even stronger than the battle immortal armor." However, Sun Cheng was still a little worried. "However, although these 2 imperial equipment are powerful, they are also seriously damaged. They are not as good as the previous one. It doesn't seem to be in good condition." "Hee." Sun Hao sneered. He looked at Xiao Hua, who was continuously putting medicinal pills into his mouth, and said, "The initial tribulation of a scattered soul cultivator is nothing to us, who is about to step into the sage of literature. Brother Chengbo's danger is that the initial tribulation of 100 scattered soul cultivators will come at the same time. However, there is only one wave of initial tribulation of 100 scattered soul cultivators. Moreover, the center of this 100 initial tribulation is not Brother Chengbo. He is only affected by it. Although these two Imperial equipment are not in good condition, they are enough to withstand it. Cheng Bo only needs to protect his true spirit from being destroyed and withstand the effects of these 100 scattered soul cultivators' lightning tribulation. After that, wouldn't everything be completely under our control? What I am worried about now is the Xiao Hua. Looking at his pressure, he is only at the 5th grade of essence energy. This level of heavenly tribulation can only restrict our movements. It cannot cause any harm to us. Even if he advanced to the 6th grade of essence energy, what can he do? Him choosing to advance at this time is really puzzling to me. How can Xiao Hua's strength be at the 5th grade of essence energy? Sun Cheng was also puzzled. If he was at the spirit severing stage, why would I need to call the two of you over? However, what Brother Ordinary said is right. I also feel that something is wrong. I don't know what medicine Xiao Hua is selling in his gourd. The corner of Sun Hao's mouth twitched slightly and said, "Who cares what medicine it is? Even if he has some method to kill Wu Han. Even if he advanced to the 6th grade of essence energy, how can the current him be a match for you and me? Even if we have to chase him to the ends of the earth, we can still kill him. It's moving, the lightning tribulation is coming." Right at this moment, the sound of thunder boomed in the sky. Within 1,000 li, hundreds of lightning tribulations fell from the sky as if they were rushing to the market, cheerfully landing on the bodies of the 100 scattered soul cultivators. Naturally, Xiao Hua and Wu Han, who were in the center of the lightning, were also struck by the lightning tribulation. This was the initial tribulation of 100 scattered soul cultivators. The might of this lightning tribulation was more than twice the lightning tribulation that Xiao Hua encountered previously. However, compared to the previous lightning tribulation, there were some advantages this time. That was that Xiao Hua was also advancing. His body was also shackled by heaven and earth. When the lightning tribulation fell, it first passed through different heaven and earth shackles before hitting Xiao Hua's body. The might was reduced by a lot. However, even so, Xiao Hua's body that had just been injured by the two Confucian cultivators collapsed under this lightning tribulation. Looking at Wu Han, he was inferior to Xiao Hua. Boom! Amidst the sound of thunder, the Imperial equipment shield that was first summoned first appeared with many armor inscriptions, revealing Immortal Palace inscriptions. However, these Immortal Palace inscriptions were quickly destroyed by the laws of heaven and earth. Moreover, the armor inscriptions were shattered by the lightning tribulation. The lightning tribulation's might didn't stop. It roared and pounced towards the child body and the long kuei on the child body's head. Dragon patterns rushed out from the long kuei and a coiled dragon image suddenly rose up when the lightning tribulation hit the long kuei. This dragon image was not complete. The long kuei that had just pounced out was immediately blocked by countless lightning tribulations. These lightning tribulations were not Xiao Hua's lightning tribulations. They were filled with the power of heaven and earth. The dragon image was only able to struggle a few times before it was annihilated by the lightning tribulation. The dragon scales of the main body turned into powder under the lightning tribulation. Chapter 4067. Fortunately. Seeing this, Sun Cheng in the distance breathed a sigh of relief and laughed. After all, Long Kuei blocked most of the lightning tribulation. Brother Qinghua should be fine. The rest of the lightning tribulation naturally fell on Wu Han's secondary body. That secondary body was condensed from earth energy, and in the end of the lightning tribulation, its arms were destroyed, but other parts of its body were not injured. Phew! The three Confucian cultivators, including Wu Han, breathed a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, before they could exhale, they saw the 100 or so scattered nascent souls sitting cross-legged around Wu Han open their eyes at the same time. Every pair of eyes contained the mockery in Xiao Hua's eyes. As the 100 or so scattered nascent souls formed lightning hand seals, the 100 or so lightning bolts once again fell on Wu Han. Sun Cheng and Sun Hao were far away, but Wu Han was in the middle of the crowd of scattered nascent souls. He could clearly see the mockery in the eyes of the hundreds of scattered nascent souls. He turned his head to look at Xiao Hua beside him in disbelief. An inconceivable thought was still growing wildly in his mind. These hundreds of scattered nascent souls, are all Xiao Hua's doppelgangers? It was a pity that he didn't have the time to think too much. These 100 bolts of lightning were even more powerful than the lightning tribulation earlier. Furthermore, the angle of these 100 bolts of lightning completely enveloped his subbody and corporeal body. There wasn't any blind spot. His huge subbody already had a pair of arms severed, and at this moment, it collapsed from the lightning tribulation. The battle immortal armor protecting Wu Han's physical body suddenly emitted a brilliant brilliance. An immortal general riding a heavenly horse waved his immortal weapon, and an almost unparalleled force met the lightning tribulation along with the golden light. Rumble! An extremely loud sound exploded in the sky. The space within hundreds of miles was continuous, and the restrictions of heaven and earth were also loosened in the waves. Kacha! In the roar, the golden brilliance that illuminated the sky was suddenly annihilated. A crisp sound fell into Wu Han's ears, and then hundreds of sharp forces poured into his physical body. Wu Han looked at the fragments of the battle immortal armor that had been cut off from his body. He gritted his teeth, and a bloody light surged around his body. A large blood-red cloud spurted out from his physical body. Kacha! Like silkworms eating mulberry leaves, when the cloud was destroyed by the lightning tribulation that was nearing its end also disappeared. Wu Han's face was deathly pale. Sensing that the restrictions around him had loosened, his eyes spitting fire, he looked at Xiao Hua, who was not far from him. At this time, Xiao Hua's body was covered in molten bronze, and he was not much better than Wu Han. Good. Sun Cheng said, Brother Chenhua's strength has greatly increased. It's really beyond our expectations. Today, Brother Chenhua's credit. Sons of course, of the hundreds of scattered nascent souls who had passed the initial tribulation, the strength of scattered nascent souls, strength of scattered heavens. As for Wu Han, countless tiny whirlpools appeared around his body, and strands of true energy were produced from the whirlpools. After the heaven and earth were imprisoned, he would madly absorb the noble qi. Although the heavenly tribulation of Xiao Hua's avatar was powerful, in the eyes of Wu Han, Sun Hao, and Sun Cheng, it was not comparable to the initial tribulation of the hundreds of scattered nascent souls. Even Wu Han was eager to fight, waiting for Xiao Hua's nascent soul to appear so that he could give Xiao Hua a show of strength. However, the situation was still beyond the expectations of the three Confucian cultivators. Just as the three of them were about to move, Xiao Hua's divine sense, which was suppressed by the initial tribulation of the hundreds of scattered nascent souls, crazily expanded, and the hundreds of scattered nascent souls suddenly and strangely disappeared along with his divine sense. What is Xiao Hua doing? Seeing that the scattered nascent souls disappeared and Xiao Hua's pressure increased greatly, Sun Cheng was very puzzled. Could it be that he thinks he is undergoing a lightning tribulation? How ridiculous! Sun Hao felt Xiao Hua's crazy pressure and his divine sense, which was several times stronger than that of ordinary Taoist divinity severing stage cultivators, and his face became somewhat unfriendly. He said in a low voice, the heavenly tribulation of the fifth stage of Taoist divinity stage should be an out-of-body tribulation, so naturally there will be no lightning tribulation. However, until now, we have not seen Xiao Hua's nascent soul. Don't forget, Xiao Hua has many tricks up his sleeve. Now that Wu Han's true energy is exhausted, he is trapped in Xiao Hua's heavenly tribulation. If Xiao Hua's heavenly tribulation is big enough, it may affect his absorption of the noble qi. Without the noble qi, Wu Han will be seriously injured. How can he be Xiao Hua's opponent? But Sun Cheng was bewildered again. Xiao Hua can't move during the tribulation. And after he passes the tribulation, you and I are still at his side. How can we just watch him kill Wu Han? I don't know. Sun Hao shook his head slightly. However, I feel that this time, Wu Han is most likely going to die. Just as Sun Hao finished speaking, a huge gust of wind whistled above Xiao Hua's head. Within several thousand li, a five-colored spirit tide suddenly appeared. This spirit tide was extremely dense, and it was as if patches of multicolored clouds had enveloped the sky. When this multicolored cloud appeared, Wu Han almost vomited blood. Such a dense spirit tide filled several thousand li, and it had already pushed the noble qi several thousand li away. At this moment, the void was also filled with all kinds of strange fluctuations. Even if Wu Han had stepped into the realm of literature saint, he probably wouldn't be able to absorb even a trace of noble qi from nearby, right? Wu Han's thoughts were naturally similar to Sun Cheng's. He hurriedly withdrew his cultivation technique and activated the little remaining true energy in his body. Like a poisonous snake, he quietly waited there, waiting for Xiao Hua to pass the tribulation and immediately reveal his poisonous fangs. Wu Han was trapped by the restriction of Xiao Hua's tribulation, so he couldn't see the range and power of the spirit tide. However, Sun Hao and Sun Cheng could see it clearly. Moreover, under Xiao Hua's oppressive pressure, they continuously retreated, and the expression in their eyes gradually turned into fear. This seems to be the spirit tide of a Dao sex cultivator during the spirit severing stage, right? Sun Hao whispered in shock, as if he was asking himself, but also as if he was asking Sun Cheng. Sun Cheng also murmured, "This divine sense isn't just at the out-of-body stage, right? Moreover, the spirit tide is so dense, it's simply like a spirit cloud." Even during the ancient Dao sex prosperity, there weren't many cultivators who could reach such a terrifying realm, right? Xiao Hua's pressure is clearly at the out-of-body stage. Sun Hao seemed to understand something and said with narrowed eyes, "This bastard must have some secret technique. He suppressed the growth of his realm, otherwise he would have been discovered by my immortal palace's inspector. Xiao Hua has such strength." Sun Cheng nodded slightly. "I'm afraid he's even more powerful than the Grand Mist Ancestor, right?" Sun Hao's figure was forced to retreat again by the spirit cloud and divine sense. He replied thoughtfully, "Of course. Therefore, this is our only chance to kill Xiao Hua. If the immortal emperor finds out, we won't have the chance to find the 9 cauldrons and obtain the 5-clawed true dragon." "Not just the immortal emperor," Sun Cheng reminded, "even the Dragon Island isn't something we can provoke. This Xiao Hua is really a big fish." Sun Hao sighed with emotion. "He's even bigger than the Grand Mist Ancestor by 3 times. Woo." Sun Cheng and Sun Hao retreated 3 steps under Xiao Hua's heavenly tribulation. Wu Han was also waiting for an opportunity. In the end, a hurricane formed several thousand feet above Xiao Hua's head, and the 5-colored spirit cloud within several thousand miles rushed towards this hurricane, forming a huge funnel in the sky. This several thousand feet in size was naturally the location of Xiao Hua's formless nascent soul, so the 3 Confucian cultivators naturally couldn't see it. Seeing the world's origin energy within several thousand miles being swept away, a fierce wind blew from the surroundings, and the same grand aura surged in the fierce wind. Wu Han narrowed his eyes, and the cultivation method in his body surged, preparing to wait until the restriction disappeared to launch a thunderous attack on Xiao Hua. Rumble! Unfortunately, before Wu Han's thunderous attack was ready, the tribulation clouds that had just dispersed reappeared in the sky, and this time the tribulation clouds were extremely similar to the tribulation clouds of the 100 scattered nascent souls before. Ah? Wu Han was really once bitten by a snake, twice shy. While trembling with fear, he hurriedly looked around, wanting to see where the scattered nascent souls appeared again. However, other than the familiar restriction of heaven and earth that was becoming increasingly firm and binding him to the point that he couldn't even move, he didn't see a single strand of nascent soul hair. Not to mention Sun Hao and Sun Cheng in the distance, even Xiao Hua himself was at a loss. This is the first tribulation of a scattered nascent soul. What does it have to do with me? My body is perfectly fine here, so how did the invisible nascent soul above my head attract the lightning tribulation? However, at this time, Xiao Hua didn't have anything to think about. His nascent soul had been through the lightning tribulation for a longer time than the 100 scattered nascent souls. The red lightning fell, and above Xiao Hua's head, several hundred feet in size collapsed with a loud bang. Then, within the lightning, it gradually expanded from the size of a fist to 1,000 feet, and the lightning tribulation came to an end. Wu Han suddenly had a hair-raising feeling, as if the 100 scattered nascent souls were looking at him with mocking gazes. Wu Han wailed and hurriedly urged the little true qi in his body. Sure enough, the lightning strangely flew out from the top of Xiao Hua's head and landed on Wu Han's naked body like a horned dragon, instantly destroying half of Wu Han's physical body. Damn it, this is somewhat inexplicable. Sun Hao's eyes flashed with a pale golden light, and he frowned. Where did Xiao Hua's nascent soul go? Why can't I see it? Could it be the invisible nascent soul? Sun Cheng very naturally thought of the most likely result. Of course this old man has heard of the invisible nascent soul. Sun Hao was puzzled. But no matter what kind of invisible nascent soul it is, it still has to appear under the lightning tribulation. Moreover, how did Xiao Hua attract the first tribulation of a scattered nascent soul? Or, Sun Cheng held his chin and said thoughtfully, this nascent soul isn't Xiao Hua's own? Forget it, don't think too much. Sun Hao's true qi surged as he said indifferently, Xiao Hua's heavenly tribulation has passed, prepare to capture him. After searching his soul, everything will be clear, okay. Sun Cheng also urged his body, preparing to fly to the other side and let Xiao Hua escape. However, before the two of them could fly, the tribulation clouds that had just dispersed in the sky condensed again, and this time, the tribulation clouds actually had 4 colors. Following the appearance of the 4-colored tribulation clouds, a heaven and earth restriction even more powerful than before spread out in all directions with Xiao Hua as the center. Sun Cheng and Sun Hao were like birds startled by the twang of a bow. They hurriedly fled far away, for fear of being affected by this restriction. Chapter 4068. As for Wu Han, who was inside the restriction, he wanted to cry but had no tears. His heart gradually became numb. Rumble! The lightning fell, enveloping the area within 100 miles of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's body immediately turned into a golden liquid. Within the golden liquid, there was not only dragon qi that flowed around the dragon patterns, but also 5-colored true qi that flowed around the inscriptions on the armor. At the same time, the runes that were the size of ants danced together with strands of soul silk. The aura that came from the Great Desolation even set off whirlpools within the golden liquid. What is this? Wu Han's eyes were as big as walnuts, as if he had seen the most incomprehensible thing in the world. However, his confusion only lasted for a few breaths. The aftermath of the lightning tribulation destroyed his body. As the inspector of the immortal palace, Wu Han naturally had a secret technique to temper his body. However, his body that had been tempered thousands of times by the lightning tribulation turned into ashes like paper. In the end, Wu Han suddenly understood, this seems to be the lightning tribulation of the great monster of the monster clan. Xiao Hua is a human. Wu Han understood too late, and he didn't have the chance to think more. Poor him, he was ravaged by the lightning tribulation again and again. In the end, he finally died a worthy death, a great death, a glorious death. Moreover, a strand of his nascent soul had just escaped and had yet to identify a direction to escape to. Rumble! The second bolt of tribulation lightning struck. Even Wu Han's nascent soul couldn't escape being ravaged by the tribulation lightning. Wu Han died. His soul was destroyed. In the distance, Sun Hao and Sun Cheng couldn't see the situation inside the lightning tribulation, so they didn't notice. However, when they saw the fierce great monster's lightning tribulation falling, they had already mourned for Wu Han in their hearts. How did Xiao Hua attract the great monster's lightning tribulation? Although Sun Cheng and Sun Hao had doubts in their hearts, thinking about the 5-clawed true dragon, the two of them were thoughtful, so no one said a word. Things had already reached this point. Even if the 5-clawed true dragon could cultivate into a great saint, the two of them couldn't stop. Xiao Hua's last wave of lightning tribulation lasted for a day and a night. When the tribulation clouds dispersed and the restrictions of heaven and earth disappeared, Sun Cheng and Sun Hao's burning heaven casting earth technique once again pounced over. After witnessing Xiao Hua's mysteriousness, the two of them became a lot more cautious and didn't particularly get close to him. Xiao Hua had escaped from the thunder tribulation. His entire body was brimming with true essence, and a rare eagerness was born from the bottom of his heart. As Xiao Hua breathed, the heaven and earth origin energy within 1,000 miles of him seemed to surge. Xiao Hua understood in his heart that although he had taken 2,560 dark-breaking pills and had truly stepped into the severed divinity stage, and his formless nascent soul was a scattered soul that had crossed the initial tribulation, and his monster body had been reconstructed during the thunder tribulation, he still didn't have any chance of victory against two Confucian Grand Masters who were on the verge of becoming saints of literature. Motherfucker! Xiao Hua's arm flashed with a bronze color, tearing apart the shackles on the edge of the burning heaven-cast earth. Relying on the strength of his physical body, he once again activated the lightning escape technique. At the same time, he cursed in his heart with regret. If I had known earlier that the formless nascent soul would have an initial tribulation and the demon body would also have 4 lightning tribulations, I would have pulled these two Confucian cultivators in as well. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. Rumble! Xiao Hua's entire body rumbled with thunder. His figure transformed into a bolt of lightning and very arrogantly rushed towards the horizon. After only flying for a moment, the thunder that resounded through the sky became somewhat mute, as if it was molting. Xiao Hua's heart stirred. Between his eyebrows, at the top of his head, the 3 corpses in thunder and 5 chi thunder hurriedly rushed out. Woo! A sharp whistling sound was emitted, and Xiao Hua's speed suddenly increased. What's going on now? Sun Cheng and Sun Cheng were startled once again. Right in front of their eyes, the dark green 3 corpses in thunder and light purple 5 chi thunder flashed again, intertwining with the thunder around Xiao Hua's body. Thousands upon thousands of righteous chi, thousands upon thousands of heaven and earth origin energy rushed into the thunder, and the sound of thunder began to become mute. Xiao Hua's lightning escape technique, which was originally about to break through, now forcibly entered the 6 paths of lightning. The speed of the lightning escape was 3 times faster than before. Soon, it would exceed the range of the two's clear eyes technique. I'm afraid because of the increase in his realm, his flying technique has advanced again, right? Sun Hao coldly smiled. He raised his hand and pointed at the heaven-burning furnace. The heaven-burning furnace fell under his feet and said, "Looks like we can only catch up with him first." AI, alright. Sun Cheng also helplessly smiled bitterly. He pointed at the earth-casting furnace and floated up. He helplessly said, "This old man has never felt that killing a Dao sect cultivator was so troublesome." As the two activated their imperial equipment, the 2 imperial equipment respectively surged out a silver-white cloud and a light blue cloud. They were not inferior to Xiao Hua's speed at all. Although these 2 imperial equipment were far apart, in the sky, the 2 clouds faintly intertwined with each other, letting out a rumbling sound. Damn it, as the saying goes, when the Tao is 1 foot tall, the devil is 10 feet tall. Seeing this, Xiao Hua's joy from the lightning escape's advancement was swept away. He unconsciously cursed in his heart, "This Xiao was able to fly fast just now, these 2 can also activate their flying imperial equipment." Cursing was cursing, Xiao Hua still had to activate his true essence to use the lightning escape technique. The lightning escape technique consumed a lot more true essence than the lightning travel 3 realms. When Xiao Hua activated it, a suffocating feeling was born from his lower dantian. He had no choice but to carefully deal with it. After flying for a few more days, Xiao Hua had already completely lost his direction. Moreover, the true essence in his body was greatly consumed because of supporting the lightning escape technique. However, because Xiao Gua and the green-robed Xiao Hua were refining pills in the space, and Xiao Hua was tempering these pills, he was not afraid of true essence drying up. However, Sun Cheng and Sun Hao were like maggots in a tarsal bone. They were not tired, nor did their true essence dry up. They still chased after him, making him extremely distressed. This time's escape was the same as last time on the Dawn Rain continent, when he was chased by Shan Zongzi and Daoist Du Yi. Xiao Hua had no place to hide, and similarly he did not know where to find a chance of survival. On the Dawn Rain continent, there was still Xue Xuehe who had no choice but to give up her life for Xiao Hua. On the hidden immortal continent, there would not be this kind of love and familial love. Spiritual fire, devil blade, innate true water, lightning technique, heavenly laws embodiment technique, heaven shocking sword, and other divine abilities, Xiao Hua thought about all of them. Letting dragon vein Xiao Hua, Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua, green-robed Xiao Hua, and even soul cultivator Xiao Hua come out together to besiege the two Confucian cultivator great grandmasters, Xiao Hua had also thought about it. However, Xiao Hua's overall strength was only at the upper middle of the 6th grade. Even if there were 10 of him, he would still not be a match for the two Confucian cultivators at the middle of the 7th grade. After all, there was a difference of 1 grade. In the eyes of cultivators, this grade could only be reached after thousands or even tens of thousands of years of cultivation. Perhaps there is only that mysterious white bones. Thinking about the horror of the blood bones in the demonic god's blood pool, Xiao Hua's heart had a kind of uneasiness. This uneasiness was even more intense than the devil blade. Although the devil blade had eroded Xiao Hua's mind, he could still control it. If the white bones with 3 heads and 6 arms were gathered, Xiao Hua felt that he would not be able to control it. Perhaps if he activated the white bones, he could kill the two Confucian cultivators, but what about the consequences? Perhaps it would be another demonic god's blood pool? Or perhaps it would be another mutual destruction. Xiao Hua did not know. Suddenly, looking at the distant horizon, Xiao Hua thought of Exin Exin and the words Exin Exin said on that rainy night. He raised his hand and took out the True Scholar's token. Since it is the True Scholar's token, it is also a protective amulet. What kind of surprise will it give you? The corner of Xiao Hua's mouth revealed a smile. If the True Scholar comes, even if he can't help this Xiao kill the 2 great masters, he can at least scare him away, right? Saying this, Xiao Hua's hand surged with 5-colored true qi. When the true qi entered the token, the whole token emitted mottled colors. Xiao Hua opened his mouth again. Pooh! The flying sword fell on it, and the token turned into powder. A wisp of 5-colored true qi rushed straight into the void and disappeared in a moment. Good. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was overjoyed and also rushed into the sky. Of course, it didn't take long before Xiao Hua couldn't find any trace of the multicolored light, so he could only fly forward. After another 10 days, he still didn't see any Confucian cultivators coming to save him. Xiao Hua felt some strange fluctuations in the space around him, and some strange outlines began to appear in the pure space. What's going on? Xiao Hua was puzzled. He released his divine sense but could not find any clues. Behind him, Sun Cheng and Sun Hao were still very close. He could only brace himself and fly forward. Hee. Xiao Hua did not know where this place was, but Sun Cheng and Sun Hao knew. When the two saw Xiao Hua fly to this place, a smile appeared on their faces. Even the imperial equipment under their feet slowed down. After all, they had chased for so long without sleep and rest. The two of them were also physically and mentally exhausted. Hey, brother ordinary. Sun Cheng breathed a sigh of relief and said with some certainty, this time we finally blocked him. We don't need to force him too much. We just need to block him on the road of death and not let him find another opportunity to escape. When we reach that place, you and I can slowly kill him. There's no need for Brother Jianjing to say anything. Sun Hao said with a smile, since we've reached this place, this old man naturally knows what to do. We must be steady first. Haha. At this point, the two of them laughed loudly. Xiao Hua flew for several days inexplicably. He saw that the mountain-like outline to his left was becoming more and more obvious. This outline was like a dark cloud, but also like a trace of space. Moreover, the outline was very similar to the mountains on land. Some of the outlines even had some traces of trees, moss, and rivers. Where is this? Why is the scene so strange? Xiao Hua was once again puzzled. This is high up in the sky, second only to the earth, fire, wind, and thunder. Where did the clouds come from? Where did the trees and rivers come from? Oh, could it be, this is the immortal palace? That's not possible. Didn't Fujiwin say it before? The immortal palace is not something that ordinary cultivators can find. Even if this Shao flew randomly, I'm afraid it's impossible to be so coincidental. Chapter 4069. Seeing that the situation was becoming more and more strange, exceeding his understanding, Xiaohua had the intention to fly out from these outlines. However, Sun Cheng and Sun Hao, who were following closely behind Xiaohua, were already steadily chasing after him. Xiaohua was simply unable to escape. Of course, noticing that the two were not in a hurry, Xiaohua was even more nervous, knowing that he might be flying into a dead end. Therefore, after being unable to escape from this strange place, he tried to fly towards the outline of the nearest mountain range. What made Xiaohua tremble with fear was that his divine sense had yet to come into contact with the outline of the mountain range. A kind of feeling of shock, majesty, fear, and so on came from his divine sense, forcing Xiaohua to withdraw his divine sense. With his divine sense already like this, how could Xiaohua still dare to approach? He could only fly forward. Of course, as he flew forward, Xiaohua also tried to fly to higher and lower places. However, no matter how he tried, the mountain range seemed to be eternally standing there. It was incomparably majestic, incomparably shocking, and forever something that Xiaohua could never hope to reach. I'm afraid I can only go forward. Xiaohua's eyes turned rapidly, fiercely gritting his teeth, thinking to himself, if it really doesn't work, I'll just drag the two of them into this dangerous place together. Who knows, I might be able to rely on luck to escape this calamity. Even if there's no luck, then it's better to die together. Just as he thought of this, the sound of armored horses came from afar. At the same time, a familiar voice rang in Xiaohua's ears. Who's there? Quickly stop. This is Black Ruins Mountain, the forbidden area of the Immortal Palace. Ordinary people cannot approach. Otherwise, kill without mercy. Sun Jian? Perfected Lord Qingyan? Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Damn, I really came to the Immortal Palace? Seeing an acquaintance, Xiaohua's eyes turned, hurriedly shouting, Perfected Lord Qingyan. I am Xiaohua of Black Wind Mountain. I have great information about the 9 provinces of the hidden Immortal Continent. I ask Perfected Lord to report it to the Immortal Emperor. Sun Jian naturally recognized Xiaohua. Standing on the flaming chariot, he shouted, Xiaohua, this is not the Immortal Palace. If you want to see the Immortal Emperor, you'd better turn back. If you continue, don't blame this true monarch for being merciless and killing you here. Boom. Sun Jian waved the 3-pointed, double-edged blade in his hand. The thousands of immortal soldiers and immortal generals behind him all circulated their true energy, and the inescapable net appeared in front of Xiaohua's head again. Damn it! Seeing Sun Jian like this, Xiaohua cursed in his heart. This is what it means to have a wolf in front and a tiger behind. Where should I run to? As they spoke, Sun Hao and Sun Cheng's clear gazes swept over, landing on Xiaohua and Sun Jian's bodies before withdrawing. Even the speed of their pursuit slowed down. Xiaohua looked at Sun Jian, the immortal soldiers and immortal generals behind Sun Jian, and even the inescapable net in front of him. He then said, Perfected Cultivator Qingyan, the battle between you and me in the Black Wind Ridge didn't end. Even though we didn't really fight, this Xiao respects you as a true man. Even if you cut off all ties with this Xiaohua will still regard you as an old friend. So this Xiaohua will tell you frankly, you and the immortal soldiers and immortal generals behind you are simply not this Xiaohua's match. If you don't want to die under this Xiaohua's hands, and if you don't want your subordinates to die under this Xiaohua's hands, then get out of the way immediately. Now that Xiaohua has been forced into such a situation by your Confucian cultivator, this Xiaohua has no more scruples. If this true monarch doesn't get out of the way, you'll kill this true monarch. Sun Jian's expression didn't change as he asked indifferently. Xiaohua nodded. That's right. This Xiaohua is being chased by 2 Confucian martial grandmasters behind me with no way out. I can only rush into this immortal palace's forbidden area to escape. If you don't get out of the way, then this Xiaohua can only attack. Sun Jian raised his eyes to look at Sun Hao and Sun Cheng, who were slowly approaching, then his gaze fell on Xiaohua again. He asked, "Do you know why those 2 martial grandmasters aren't in a hurry to kill you?" "Naturally, it's because of this forbidden area." Xiaohua answered somewhat impatiently. "But do you know where this forbidden area is?" Sun Jian asked again. Xiaohua sneered, "Didn't you say this place is Black Ruins Mountain?" "Correct, this place is Black Ruins Mountain." Sun Jian nodded. "But this place has another name, it's called Heaven's Prison." Heaven's Prison? Xiaohua was dumbstruck. You came to guard the Heaven's Prison? This Heaven's Prison is the Immortal Palace's prison? The Immortal Palace's prison isn't here. Sun Jian explained. This place is the Heaven's Prison. Any cultivator who enters the Heaven's Prison, no matter how high their cultivation is, can never come out alive. Immortal Emperor? Great Sage? Mahavairakana Revered One? Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air and said in shock, "They also can't come out alive? Any cultivator." Sun Jian answered word by word. This Xiaohua understands. Xiaohua finally understood why Sun Hao and Sun Cheng weren't in a hurry to kill him. "You're guarding this place to prevent cultivators from entering by mistake." "Of course." Sun Jian nodded, then looked at the approaching Sun Cheng and Sun Hao and said indifferently, "Since you know this is the Heaven's Prison, then turn back. This true lord's duty is here, I can't let you pass." "Damn it, I already know this is the Heaven's Prison, how can this Xiaohua still go in?" Xiaohua was speechless, but he still felt lucky in his heart and asked in a low voice, "Then, what's the Heaven's Prison like?" "No one knows." Sun Jian shook his head. "No one has ever come out from there, so no one knows what's inside. Has anyone ever gone in?" Sun Jian looked at Xiaohua, knowing that he had not given up, and said indifferently, "Billions of years ago, there seemed to be a Wenxing who rebelled against the Immortal Palace. The Immortal Palace laid down an inescapable net but couldn't kill him. Later, he was forced into the Heaven's Prison and disappeared." "All right." Xiaohua waved his hand and said, "You don't need to say any more." After saying that, Xiaohua turned around, his eyes flashing with determination as he looked at the 2 Confucian cultivators approaching. Sun Jian controlled the flaming war chariot and retreated a few li, coldly looking at everything that happened in front of him. The inescapable net in front of him had not been removed. Sun Cheng and Sun Hao flew to the front, and each of them pointed their feet. The burning sky furnace and the earth casting furnace flew up into the air, and the earth casting furnace landed on the ground, spinning around, waiting for an opportunity to pounce on Xiaohua. "You too." Xiaohua looked at the 2 imperial equipment aggressively, took out a Qingkuan bag and held it in his hand and said, "This is what you want. This Xiaohua will give it to you. However, after you take it, can you let this Xiaohua live?" Sun Cheng smiled and clapped his hands. "People often say that a wise man submits to circumstances. Taoist Xiao is indeed a wise man. If you had done this earlier, why did you have to tear apart everyone's face? This Xiaohua thinks that he is the kind of person who will not turn back until he hits the south wall, and can't be considered a wise man." Xiaohua shook his head slightly, "But now, this Xiaohua has no way out, and can only choose to compromise. As long as the 2 of you swear an oath, this Xiaohua will immediately send this Qingkuan bag over." Sun Cheng looked at Sun Hao, and the 2 of them exchanged glances. Sun Cheng said somewhat regretfully, "Taoist Xiao, if it was before Liao Jiang, or before your tribulation, not to mention swearing an oath, even if we directly let you go, it would not be impossible. But now, do you think that we still have the qualifications to let you go? But we must ask Taoist Xiao to make a trip with us to know the result." Sun Hao also said, "But this old man feels that Taoist Xiao need not worry. If you use this item to atone for your crimes, you may still have a way out." Sigh. Xiaohua sighed, kept the Qingkuan bag and said, "If the 2 of you let this Xiaohua go now, this Xiaohua can naturally give that item to you without worry. But if you want this Xiaohua to be captured without putting up a fight and wait to be dealt with, that won't do. If the two of you push too far, this Xiaohua will rush into Black Ruins Mountain and let you draw water with a bamboo basket. Ah! Sun Cheng laughed loudly, pointing at the inescapable net and said, Taoist Xiao, what do you think Taoist Master Qingyan is doing here? Without his immortal palace imperial equipment, can you enter the heavenly prison? Besides, Taoist Xiao, Sun Hao also advised, once you enter the heavenly prison, you will definitely die. But if you follow this old man and the others back, you may not necessarily die. Why do you have to make things difficult for yourself? Xiaohua pinched his chin, thinking to himself. He understood in his heart that if it was purely because of the 9 provinces cauldrons, he really didn't need to be too afraid. But the problem was that the Immortal Palace didn't only have a grudge with the 9 provinces cauldrons, there were also those 100 nascent soul cultivators, and also Yaotai Mountain. He had a lot of secrets on him, and he couldn't reveal any of them, so how could he just let himself be captured without putting up a fight? Forget it. Xiaohua looked at the 2 imperial equipment approaching, and made a decision in his heart. Just as Xiaohua was about to take out White Bone from the space, the heaven-burning furnace and the earth-casting furnace suddenly moved. Hundreds of vast chi pillars shot out from the void, landing on the 2 imperial equipment. The 2 imperial equipment expanded to several miles in size in a few breaths, firmly locking Xiaohua inside. Ah! Xiaohua laughed. So the 2 of you didn't plan to let this Xiao go. This Xiao has always been asking a tiger for its skin. When the 2 imperial equipment moved, Sun Cheng and Sun Hao naturally moved as well. The 2 of them urged their bodies to move, and still released the 3-colored genuine qi. Under the burning heaven casting earth technique, the area around Xiaohua within 100 miles was enveloped in silver white and light blue flames. Layers of righteous qi surged into the flames like waves. The surface of Xiaohua's body was naturally burned by the flames, but at this time, although the flames were fierce, they couldn't melt Xiaohua's body. Only some of the flames landed on his body, creating deep fire scars, but these fire scars quickly healed under the bronze brilliance. However, the power of the domain within the flames was heavily pressed on Xiaohua's body by the giant peak, and all of his true qi and true qi couldn't be mobilized. However, when the 2 Confucian cultivators saw Xiaohua's calm expression, they didn't dare to be negligent. Each of their subbodies appeared, and the subbodies waved their arms, urging the 2 imperial equipment to gradually close. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.